Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and ladies, and others, and welcome to part 7 of our series discussing and explicating and cogitating about David Lynch's final cinematic work, which is called Twin Peaks: The Return, or Twin Peaks Season 3. I hope all of you are doing well, and thank you for joining in. Before we start, I will do the obligatory thing, and I will say, if you'd like to support these streams and you want to support Mr. D, I'm not yet monetized on YouTube, so the way you can do that, of course, is to visit buymeacoffee.com and /John D, and you can see that it's spelled IOHNDEE. That's Buy Me a Coffee John D, and that's the way you can throw a coffee or two my way as your way of saying I love you, Mr. D, and it will be greatly appreciated. And I am joined, of course, as ever, and quite happily, by my two friends and guests, Christopher Sandbatch. Hello, Sandbatch.
How's it going? You know what I'm sick of? People tend to. Okay, so I was talking to you all about this. Thinking of fleeing the country, and this wonderful. Every time I post something like this, or like I want to leave, I want to get out of New Orleans, I want to do something, I get a cavalcade of responses, and a lot of them are along the same lines. It's like, seeing this one seems to me like this country is chock full of places one can flee to become an ornery old cuss early in life. That's true, but I think that the good people of Twitter frequently confuse me with Rust Cole, who I am not at all. I'm actually an incredibly social person who enjoys being in major world culture centers, but I'm not at all a guy who moves to the edge of town and works in a bar. That's not me. It's not me. So that's how I'm doing. Sorry.
Well, that's a very circuitous route to hello, but I'm pleased to hear it, and I think you got a little bit of coal in your stockings, but that's okay. And also joined
that was funny, by the way. That was a good one.
I don't know. I'm feeling very Christmassy. And also joined by my inestimable friend and frog, Mr. Prudentialist. How you doing, Prudentialist?
I'm doing well. I have no complaints. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving, and happy to be back.
Indeed. And yes, I had very good Thanksgiving. Mine was delayed. I didn't do the feast on the day. I had to do it a few days later, but that's okay. Everything turned out well. With my disjointed turkey and all the trimmings. I did something really cursed this year, which is to I tried an old 1950s recipe that I found in some old book for cranberry relish, it was called, but it had the shocking addition of cherry flavored Jello. And I just thought, this is the kind of weird recherche thing. But, weirdly, it kind of worked, because it was raw cranberry ground up. It wasn't the cooked kind where all the pectin, explodes and it makes it gel. So you need something to kind of give it body, but you want that nice fresh taste. And it actually worked very well. I mean, not terribly fond of the slightly artificial flavor of the Jello, but some of those old recipes, if you ignore the kind of snooty, modern taste for all things natural and artisanal, some of them are pretty good, I have to say. All right.
I'm with you on some of that stuff, but when it comes to Jello salad and that sort of thing, it's a bit too much for me. You know what I mean?
No, I know the thing. I mean, the things where you mold, Vienna sausages into a lime Jello. No, those things are really cursed. Weirdly enough, the kind of origin of those actually goes back to sort of haute cuisine with these splendid molded aspic things, which were very popular in the 19th century, but they sort of they got degraded to the point where it's lime Jello and wieners. I mean, it's sort of nightmarish.
Well, and just to complete this thought, my favorite recipe book ever is called River Road Recipes, and the reason I like it, it's the textbook of Louisiana cuisine, but sometimes sometimes it shows like artifacts of the moment when it was compiled, which was in the 1950s. And so you'll be going through it and you'll get there's an incredible French onion soup recipe in it that is like probably dates from the early 19th century that is very cool. But then there's like other stuff where it's like very clearly like World War II rationing and that sort of thing that creep into it. So you kind of pick through it. But it's that stuff that I'm like, I don't know what that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
indeed. No, and similarly with British cookery books after the war, because one of the reasons people sort of associate British food with being bad is because of the deprivations of the war. And remember that rationing went on for 10 years after the war in Britain. So anyway, well, speaking of the 50s, we're going to dive back into the strange and wonderful world of David Lynch. Tonight, we're speaking about hopefully episodes 7 and 8. Episode 7 has the subtitle, There's a Body, All Right. And so we'll just, let's just jump into it. So episode 7 opens with our friend Jerry Horn dashing through the forest in a most confused manner, and looking very paranoid for some reason or other. And he calls his brother Ben Horn, long-suffering brother who, they always had that sort of relation, even in the old series, that sort of relationship where, Ben was sort of, well, Jerry was sort of as like acting as a kind of little hatchet man minion, and Ben was sort of like having to clean up the various messes that Jerry had made. But of course, we know in present day Twin Peaks, Jerry is running some sort of cannabis operation, because of course he is. But for what reason he's in the forest, I don't know. But it's sort of a wonderful scene. We get another scene that's even more memorable in a later episode involving Jerry's foot. But that doesn't happen right away. But in a way, we kind of need to get him into the wilds, because he is also in his weird sojourn into the forest and the desert later on. He actually has to witness something important. So it's sort of interesting that Lynch sort of places him, what's nel mezzo del cammin de nostra vita, in the middle of the journey of his life. He finds himself in a dark wood where the straight way is lost. So that's all I could think of about this. Any thoughts about our little opening scene here?
No, I think you're exactly right, but we think the same way, and so I made the same association. Like I was literally like trying to decide whether or not I needed to look up the Italian there, and then I just decided not to do it.
Yeah.
I do like, though, I love how both of the Horn brothers have like flattened out over the course of over the intervening 25 years into basically the two types of boomer that you meet in the Pacific Northwest. That's it. There's only two kinds.
Yeah, that's sort of true. I mean, as I've said before about Ben Horn, I'm fascinated by the fact that at the end of season 2 of Twin Peaks, he had this sort of he sort of had this come to God moment where he just like decided to be like virtuous, and he actually did care about the stoat or whatever it was, the Pacific weasel or something. He'd started this facetious campaign to try to scupper the sale of Ghostwood, or that property, what it was called. But then he ended up actually believing in. He started to read the Quran and the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. And then, of course, at the very end, he makes the fatal decision. He so wants to sort of do right after being really the kind of most consistently bad person in Twin Peaks. I mean, other than murderers. Although, I mean, of course, he was also kind of proximate to murder and sex trafficking and all sorts of prostitution and all sorts of things. But I'm sort of struck by that he was kind of the worst overall person in Twin Peaks, and then of course he turns into like virtuous Ben Horn, and of course decides to go and reveal that he is Donna Hayward's real father, which of course causes a huge scene, and he gets struck on the head with a fireplace poker by Doc Hayward. So, but what's odd, of course, is that he seems to have remained good. Because basically everything that he does in this series in season 3, he remains virtuous, which is it's a very strange thing for a David Lynch character in a way. But I kind of wonder about that. And, that from the worst to the best kind of character. Very interesting arc. Any further thoughts about this, Mr. Brood? Anyone?
I just enjoy that Ben Horn, I think, has somewhat redeemed himself in regards. I know it's not as in vogue in part because he's got the allegations against him and things like that. But I'm reminded of a bit from the Bill Cosby show that's not the woman I grew up with. This is an old person trying to get to heaven, and but to some extent he has matured, and which is appreciated. I think that experiencing everything that you do is in the same way that Bobby Briggs had become a person. It seems that those who were you would call evil or just generally not the best type of characters in the original run, the death of Laura Palmer certainly had an impact on them for the better.
Yeah, indeed. Although it was actually I mean, given the fact that we learned in the original series that Ben Horn actually had slept with Laura Palmer, it really takes like later things like that doesn't her kind of brutal murder doesn't even really redeem him. It's a sort of weird moment in the second season. But anyway, so meanwhile, back at the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Office, if you recall from episode 6, Deputy Hawk saw some signs, which some augurs, which the log lady told him about. That he would see. I can't remember her exact words. He would see like symbols of your people, and of course, it was an Indian. It was a buffalo nickel, and then a little badge on the toilet door. And of course, he prized it open, and what does he find? He finds pages from Laura Palmer's diary. And here he and Frank Truman are examining them. And I mean, I don't know if you gents remember that back in the original series, both the one-armed man Mike and Leland Palmer was seen going into the loo at the sheriff's department, and so there was that it was implied then that perhaps something happened. We know something happened to the one-armed man. That's when he had his sort of freak out when he had to inject himself with Thorazine. We find these pages which were apparently in that door all those years, and you can sort of read, I mean, this is the famous line: "My name is Annie. I've been with Dale and Laura. Me? The good Dale is in the lodge, and he can't leave. Write it in your diary." In fact, there's a scene in Fire Walk with Me, quite an unsettling little scene, where Laura wakes up in her bed and bloodied Annie is next to her, and she says that's what she says to her. This is when she gets the sort of vision. And then the other page we see, of course, the moon has been high in the sky for hours, and I can't sleep. It's 1:30 a.m. I'm crying so hard I can hardly breathe. Now I know it isn't Bob. I know who it is. So these are the key pages that were missing from the diary, of course, that no one has seen, except for us, of course, the audience.
But it's still completely unknown, of course, to the crew.
Yeah, and of course they're not really putting it together. I mean, remember this case, there's a very old case, and of course Hawk remembers, and Frank Truman, of course, wasn't there for all the events. He's a new character, so he's not really familiar with the case. I mean, Hawk is really having to fill him in on it. I mean, the only other person, Andy maybe would remember, and Bobby Briggs, of course, because he was a suspect for a while. So, it's a kind of curious moment, and a curious sort of, you get these little moments where the kind of again in the return, these moments where it teases kind of coming back to the whodunit, kind of the original mystery of the show. It's like, oh wait, we're gonna leave the world of Dougie Jones and Mr. C and all this other strange things, and look, it's back, and they're in the sheriff's station, and they're looking at Laura Palmer clues and evidence, and there's a kind of there's this sort of these tiny little moments where you're kind of tempted back to the story, but then of course they remain quite fragmentary. And so actually this revelation prompts Frank Truman here to to do a Skype call with none other than Doc Hayward. I'm amused because if you remember, I mean, you could see it here, but like the office is very recherche. There's no like electronics in it, and it's all the kind of wood and whatever. But then he like pushes this button, and this like screen, this like wood framed screen rises from the desk. Like it's a very weird moment. This is not something that you can order from from your office provision outfit. So I like the idea that there's this weird, totally custom unit here, which is odd. But we of course get to see we get to see Doc Hayward again. I mean, he was very, very old. The actor who played him, whose name was Warren Frost, and so he was only able to do this little bit. He wasn't actually able to appear in the show, and he died very, very soon afterwards. He was one of the sort of first of the cast to die after his appearance in the return. And of course, Warren Frost is the father of co-creator of Twin Peaks, Mark Frost. So yeah, and of course, a much beloved character. He was a kind of, again, in the kind of horrific duality of Twin Peaks. He was sort of like the warm country doctor who was the sort of center of the community, and so yeah, yes, the producer and co-creator and writer, his father, Warren Frost.
This feels like a very quaint scene, considering how many things like this would happen for television and movies just a few short years later with COVID.
Oh yeah, the Skype meeting. Yeah, it's sort of weirdly prescient. Most of that conversation is about fishing. Also, I noticed. I don't know. I just imagine you having a got trout hat, Prude.
I have one. I have at least two. So it's not like it's something I'm completely unfamiliar with.
Amazing. All right. So, I mean, feel free to jump in, either of you. I don't want to sort of call on you like teacher. If you have anything to say, just barge in before I move on. So we find ourselves again traveling between many far-flung locations. We find ourselves next in the Buckhorn, South Dakota police station, where, of course, they're keeping in the morgue. They're keeping that headless torso, and this character, whose name I don't have her full face, Lieutenant Cynthia Knox, and of course she's some liaison between the U.S. military or some branch of the military, I can't recall which, who has come there basically to say, we know that you got a hit on a print in this database, and we want to know where it's from. And he said, well, we pulled it off a body. And she said, a body? And she's like, there's a body. And of course, that's where the subtitle of this episode, there's a body, all right. And she can't believe it. And the reason she can't believe it, I don't think they actually reveal it. Do they reveal it? That it's Briggs?
Yes, they say that the prints come from the body.
Come from the body, and we know that the body, as far as we can tell, belongs to Major Briggs, who died many years prior to this. So she's quite shaken up about that. She says, but this is not going to be your case for much longer, because obviously weird things are happening. And then she goes out into the hallway to call her superior, who's I think called Colonel Davis, and of course she sees one of the woodsmen, which is never a good sign. Again, where there's smoke, there's fire. Where you can smell fire, then fire is near. So, and of course, often when the previous moment where we saw one of the woodsmen, bad things happen when they appear. I mean, you remember I think the very first episode, you see one in the next holding cell when
Matt Lillard's character goes to prison.
Yeah. I can't ever remember the character's name.
I don't remember his name either.
It's funny because it's William Hastings. I just remember that because, of course, William the Conqueror in the Battle of Hastings. So there's a lot of those strange sort of Dickensian names in this series. But anyway, of course, the woodsman doesn't get her, but he's wandering about the morgue. And a great shot, by the way. This is just the establishing shot in Gordon Cole's office, but I like that he has a painting of corn. Corn's very important, He stole the corn. I had it canned over the store. No, I mean that's what Mike shouts to Laura Palmer and Leland Palmer. Remember in that distressing scene in the previous episode. So yeah. Corn's a thing. Gammon Bozier. All right. Anyway, so we pan over, of course, to Gordon Cole, who is sat in front of his giant picture of the Trinity test.
Totally not foreshadowing.
Totally not foreshadowing.
Do you know how much that image sold for at his estate auction?
No.
$42,000.
This enlargement of
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, and it's like a cheap enlargement of the photo too. Yeah, but it sold for $42,000. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I that auction. This was months ago. The Lynch estate sold a bunch of things, and it was the estimated prices were ludicrously low. I mean, because I was like, oh, it can't be. Because I was going to bid. On. They had 3 or 4 lots of his hand tools. And the estimate was like $100, and I'm like, no way, no.
Really,
and of course, they went for thousands and thousands of dollars.
Those brand new hand tools go for thousands of dollars. And
David Lynch and a lot of these, a lot of them were like really old, and some of them were custom. Everything, every coffee cup. The coffee cups went for a huge amount of money. So, but anyway, yeah. So. But in this scene, of course, Albert comes back with his report about meeting with Diane, and apparently, of course, we only saw the moment where she kind of turned around in the bar and saw him, but we didn't hear the result of it. And of course, the result of it is that she said, "Fuck off, Albert," and so he said he couldn't get anything done. So Gordon decides to go with Albert to her flat and have a chat with her. And there's a young man, of course, just fresh off an assignation with Diane. And her flat is very, speaking of the 1950s, she's got a very particular aesthetic. And of course, I appreciate that apparently Lynch and Laura Dern came up with Diane's look, like her kind of her Bakelite, kind of costume jewelry.
Wow, look at that! It's the love child of David Lynch and Laura Dern.
There she is. and some of these pieces, again, if you're familiar with particularly early 50s, some of these are French. Some of these are French.
I do have an issue with it. I do have an issue with it, which is that it's far too West Coast for where it's theoretically placed.
Well, it's meant to be Philadelphia, right?
I think Washington D.C. Like the vibes that I get are this is like Georgetown or something like that. because like Gordon Cole is like he's like working at Langley, like he's doing too much dealing with maybe inferring, but I do this a lot whenever I do infer, whenever I watch things. I'm very like, of all the elements of fiction. Oh, of all of the elements of fiction, the one that I spend the most time on is place. And so like if I look for it first, and so I have to like geographically place everything in every story that I watch, every story that I'm like a sort of part of or something like that. And my inference here is that they have to be in Washington, D.C. because Gordon Cole is dealing too much with like large federal bureaucrats.
I hate to tell you, but it's meant to be Philadelphia.
Well, why am I even on this show? I'm going to throw my computer at the wall.
I didn't know either because it does, because you see an exterior shot and it looks like a Georgetown, a townhouse in Georgetown. But
Philadelphia does kind of look like that. I've only been to Philadelphia once, and I want to burn it down. So Philadelphians.
We know David Lynch's thoughts about Philadelphia. He says basically it was the most horrible place that he's ever been, and yet, of course, he said that it was the thing that turned him towards his particular aesthetic and helped him establish, the artist that he became. So, both a wonderful and horrible place. Like visiting hell.
Something awful and beautiful is coming. A poetry collection you can read on Spectre Poets by Sandbatch.
All right. So anyway, of course, Diane is as caustic as ever. Here's a shot for the fans from that scene. But she does, of course, deign to serve them coffee and have a moment with speaking to them, and during which, of course, Gordon. He wants to talk about Cooper. And we learn that, of course, something bad happened the last time Diane saw, quote, Agent Cooper. But what he's here to do is to convince her to come with them to Buckhorn, to identify what they think is Cooper, who's in prison there, and. So she is, of course, not pleased with this, but I think also just kind of shocked about the idea of his returning and appearing in a prison. So she does agree to go with them.
One of the very few fails in the series is the idea that this is a very rare David Lynch plot flub, and I always like to point out whenever he does flubs. And the flub is sending Albert in to do the warmest cold reveal ever, and then pretending like there's any chance Diane is not getting involved here. So it's a slightly flubbed imposition of this whole scene into the plot, but we'll allow it.
Yeah, I'm
in a bad mood tonight. I'm like, you're just like,
yeah. Oh dear.
I think everyone knew when this was being produced that it was just like, oh, Laura Dern is Diane. Like I'm sure as great as this was probably to see this on television for the first time, they're like, okay, who else was it going to be?
Yeah. No, obviously. I don't know if I've said this before, but I was initially quite disappointed that Diane appeared as a character. Like, I was not happy about that at first because I was so fond of the plot device in the original series of Diane being this sort of disembodied presence, who was the kind of, almost, and the way that a normal person would have, talked to God or in prayers or sort of reviewed the day with their wife or something like that. Cooper had this relationship with a woman on the other end of a micro cassette recorder. So I was initially a bit sort of not terribly happy about this, but I grew to like the kind of Diane arc, and obviously I like Laura Dern, and it was a very curious decision to make, but I have to go with it. So she gets on the jet, and of course one of her signature lines is, of course, telling people "fuck you," which is I think what made me sort of warm up to her, because this is me. She's literally me. Swig the vodka and tell the person who brought it fuck you. That's the way I roll. But she's very caustic and acerbic. And, I mean, I think there's also a kind of disconnect because I don't think anyone who watched the original series imagined that this is what Diane would be like. I think that everyone had a kind of very different image.
Yeah.
Of this character.
And yet then she turns out to be yet another instantiation of my mother, who dresses exactly like that.
With the leopard print. With the leopard print. Yeah. Anyway. Meanwhile, don't, someone's spoiling it in the chat. Shh, don't tell. Anyway, so meanwhile, on the plane, Cole and what's her name? Tammy. Yeah, Tammy Preston, Agent Tammy Preston, are talking about the fingerprints, and of course reveals that the difference is that the Mr. C fingerprints are reversed. They're a mirror image, and here we actually get. You remember when when Cole and Albert first talked to Mr. C in the prison? They have this exchange, and of course he says, "I am very pleased to see you again, old friend." I don't know. There's a weird thing, and I didn't actually catch it on my first watch of the series. It was only later. I think it may be when I saw this, I was like, oh, okay, the backwards word. But Cooper, of course, Cole, of course, was quite aware of that weird little slip up, and is, of course, equating it with the reverse fingerprint. And to what extent Gordon Cole knows about the Black Lodge, I don't know. I suspect he knows all about it. But curiously, I don't think he ever has any kind of encounters with any of those entities.
No,
he does. He has the one where he almost gets sucked into the portal.
Oh yeah. Oh, in the return, yeah, with the woodsman. But I mean with the kind of Black Lodge people. I mean, in the original series, I don't think he had any interaction. Even though, of course, he's
the original series he doesn't.
He's Cooper's boss and whatever. But yeah, so it is curious that I don't know again if he's putting it together.
I think not. I actually think not. I think they're the implication I guess they're sort of aware that these things are happening, but they're not real big on specifics. They don't have any, because it's kind of what Cooper's doing when he shows up at Twin Peaks. It's like the mystery that's actually getting unraveled next to the other mystery, which is that there's this dead girl, but this dead girl actually it has the key to Cooper figuring out this whole lodge schema. Yeah.
No, it is curious, and of course, remember that I think that we know that Cooper was quote visiting the Black Lodge, but I think the only time he physically went there was at the end. When he never returned. I mean, he had previous encounters, but I think they were always sort of dreams or visions. Yeah. So his actual encounter with it, they would never have heard about, because of course he never escaped until, of course, present day. But it's very curious. I love this when we see this picture of.
Well, actually, no. I mean, I can develop this even more, because the scene with David Bowie as Philip Jeffries sort of severe, strongly indicates that Lynch is that Gordon Cole's aware of this figure named Judy, but has nothing in the way of specific details, and he gets rapidly shut down there.
Well, we know that Cole knows all about Judy, because he's the person who actually tells the Judy lore later in a later episode. It comes from Cole, so he certainly knows.
But I don't think they understand the mechanism. Though there is an argument to be made that the scene with Philip Jeffries is an encounter with one of these entities, because whatever Philip Jeffries is, he's very clearly be one of them.
Yeah, I mean, he does sort of becomes one, because he says, "I've been to their meetings."
Yeah.
And also, there's a moment in that scene in Fire Walk with Me where he points at Cooper and he says, "Who do you think this is here?" Which
Yeah.
is sort of weirdly like maybe a foreshadowing of the fact that Cooper's going to, that his identity is going to become muddled in a certain way in the future. Anyway, I love like sort of international criminal Mr. C walking beside a swimming pool here. It's just like a hilarious picture someone worked up in the art department. You know? But of course, we also learn that Mr. C is extraordinarily wealthy. You know, yeah, I mean, he's basically on Epstein Island here. You know, he's you know, and in fact, he's much more competent than Epstein was. Epstein was actually quite an idiot.
Tiger Burn 81 says Jasper John's painting. That doesn't work because there's way too much life in this painting for Jasper Johns.
Yeah, no, and he's not actually thinking about Jasper Johns. He's thinking about David Hockney.
Yeah, Hockney. I love Hockney's work, but there's too many signs of life here.
Yeah, it's not totally drained. I mean, to be fair to Hockney, who is one of my favorite living artists, but you know, in those early pictures of California, that they were curiously dead. I think partially intentionally, and partially, of course, you know, is the acrylic paint. It really does. In fact, the painting is called. It just sold a few years ago. The painting of the man standing by the pool with another man diving in the pool. Yeah. What if we kissed underneath David Bowie's adrenochrome church?
Damn.
Lol. Anyway, but we do learn, of course, that Mr. C is a billionaire and whatever, which I think is also meant to kind of make us perhaps think back to the mysterious billionaire who was funding that observation place where the glass box was.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the implication. It's him, isn't it? I
Yeah,
like,
yeah, okay. And it turns out that it was him who was funding that. So, but yeah, there's a very interesting conversation. I didn't have any slides, but Lynch also does this thing where he touches her fingers and it's very, very good. You know, he does this sort of numbers thing and talks about, you know, her fourth finger being, you know, her soul line or something like that. I don't know. And I had to capture this exchange.
Things only Sandbatch's girlfriends say. David Lynch.
Oh man. And I had to catch this moment. I love this. I don't know if either of you caught it. By the time we checked it out, it belonged to some girl from Ipanema. Oh,
it's a great song, by the way.
Yeah, for the Zoomers in the crowd, there's a song about a girl from Ipanema that you should look up because it's good.
It's a banger.
Yep. Anyway, so of course we get this sort of dump of information, and then they arrive at the prison in Spiritual Finger. Yeah. Thank you. They arrive at the prison for her to observe this Cooper. Great moment. Fuck you, Tammy. And then the curtain rises, and here we go. I particularly like this shot with her kind of reflection, you know, sort of hovering below his in the window. And the meeting doesn't really go very well. I mean, she's very, very quickly, she realizes that something is wrong. Something is real. And in fact, I think a small Mexican child could feel like something is wrong when talking to Mr. C. Like he's very off-putting, and you know, there's nothing natural about this moment. I do wonder to what extent Mr. C knew that he wasn't convincing any of them. He couldn't have been stupid enough to think that he fooled them. Maybe.
To an extent, I think this is kind of what he wants.
Maybe to kind of scare them. Because I mean, again, because you know, he's like, he also must know. I think what's curious here is that we don't find out till later, but this scene is two fakes, confronting each other, and basically he could say the same thing to her because he knows, of course, the secret about Diane, because I assume that he was involved in the creation. So it's a very odd moment, but only in retrospect. I mean, you have to sort of watch the series multiple times before you kind of understand these things, because of course you don't get the big revelations until much later in the show. But needless to say, of course, she's aware. She shuts the curtain and is very shaken, and has a moment with Gordon Cole, telling him that things aren't right. The next image is, again, I don't know if I'm off base about this, but I think also very telling in retrospect, is when she hugs him for comfort. You notice he doesn't actually embrace her. Like his hand stops and he just hovers it there. He doesn't actually put his hand on her back and fully embrace her. And I wonder to what extent he was aware of Diane's nature. Like if that was a bit of foreshadowing, or if it's just something that happened during the filming of this scene. It seemed very deliberate that he seems very uncomfortable in this moment.
Yeah. Like something's wrong here. That's a good catch.
Yeah, I mean, something's wrong not only with, of course, this Cooper, but there's something wrong with Diane as well. So, just a moment, and of course, again, Diane, being literally me, enjoys a cheeky drink after this horrible moment. Meanwhile, of course, back in the prison, Mr. C sends a message to Warden Murphy about Mr. Strawberry. If you recall, I think we mentioned Mr. Strawberry previously. And we learn, of course, subsequently that Mr. Strawberry was a dog. And so, of course, Mr. C Knew that the warden would, of course, understand what this meant, and of course he would see him. I mean, there's probably not. It probably, an ordinary prisoner saying, "I need to, I need to see the warden." I don't think it would happen this way. But of course, he knew how to push the buttons, because, of course, whatever this transpired about Mr. C, which is actually mentioned earlier, you don't know what it is, but it's mentioned that about a dog leg. But we learn, of course, that there are various parts of this dog, and so yeah, we learn that, of course, good old Bad Dale here has got some leverage over the warden. Do they ever? I don't remember. Is it ever revealed what Mr. C has on the warden?
It's implied in the conversation. It's implied that it's someone who's dead. Like there's a body here in some kind of operation that you don't want to know about.
Okay. Yeah, it's sort of it's a classic, what do they call it? The MacGuffin, it's a sort of like seemingly important thing, but it's just necessary to know that he does have some leverage over the warden. In fact, leverage enough, as we'll see at the end of this episode, that facilitates his escape. And also, I really like this shot here with the those sort of corpse-colored filing cabinets and the green, the sort of miserable mold green chairs. You sort of get this sort of nod towards mid-century modern, but it's clearly like weirdly institutional. So nice bit of set dressing there. And then, of course, in our mad dash around the world, we go back to beautiful Las Vegas, and we join our old friends Janie E. and Dougie Jones. And Dougie is being visited by some police officers at his office, who are concerned about a vehicle that they found, which, of course, was the car that exploded in front of that house at Rancho Rosa if you recall from the last episode. And asking Dougie about this. It's called Janie E. in her role as Dougie's tirelessly fierce waifu. She said he doesn't know anything about any car. You bugger off, basically. These detectives are also just like stock comedy characters. Again, to the theme of the whole Dougie Jones arc being a kind of magic realist sitcom. The three detectives, there's one of them who just giggles all the time. Sounds a bit like Tucker Carlson. And and the other two, they're the classic sort of Three Stooges types. But anyway, of course, so Janie E and Dougie, they leave the building and they're walking out through that strange plaza, which has the cowboy statue in it, amongst other things. And who should rush out of the crowd?
But Ike the Spike.
Ike the Spike. This miserable little homunculus, yes. Who of course, again, meant to be some sort of hitman that had been, that they've been looking after. But I mean, as I said last week when he murdered Lorraine, that woman Lorraine, it's kind of his MO. It seems a bit messy, maybe racing into an office in broad daylight and eviscerating a woman with an ice pick. Oh, actually, several women with an ice pick. It just isn't the most subtle. Like if you want to call a hit on someone, it seems like there'd be more efficient ways of doing it. Also, running up to someone in a very heavily populated plaza, again in the middle of the day, as a small person, and just shooting at someone. Does that seem like a good strategy?
I mean, it's Vegas.
Just a part and parcel of living in Vegas. Yeah. Okay.
I'll take the Sadiq Khan answer on this issue. No, like I mean, clearly he's out to finish the job. Lorraine has been got. I think he kind of knows that he's probably going to, the fuzz is on him, so to speak. Like, you don't just kill two people randomly with an ice pick and expect to maybe walk away from that one and any sort of good standing with the law. I'm sure he's got a record. Also, just he's got, manlet rage strikes again and tries to kill somebody out in broad daylight. But the best part about this, of course, is what immediately follows.
Yes.
So I we can go for there. I have to appreciate Janie E, like you had said, being the long-suffering wife, because she's just like, it was an old car and it was a bad car. It was from a used lot. She's like, well, shit, I don't know where like my husband's car is. I just found out that he was with a black hooker a couple of days ago. Like, what am I supposed to do with all this? And then later after that, she's like, well, if you hadn't lost the car, we could have had an insurance claim and we could have gotten you a nice one. Don't go gamble all this away. She plays this perfect, you and I have discussed on previous episodes where the whole Dougie Jones arc feels like a surrealist meta comedy about the long suffering sitcom wife and the kind of like retarded husband. And I feel like in a lot of ways, if this gets played out, and it's just like, what if your wife was just sick of your shit, but knew she had to play along because that's part of the bit? And that's Janie E to a T.
Yeah, it is interesting though, because of course we notice, and there are things that will happen. Well, actually, this scene and things that will happen subsequently, where Janie E really starts to see another side of her husband, and it really seems to actually draw her closer to him in a real way. Like she's well. So what happens here is that Ike, rushes out of the crowd, and we're used to Dougie. I mean, Dougie can't even piss by himself. Remember, he had to have her take him to potty. Remember, there's a woman in the office who also had to take him into the bathroom. So like he can't do anything, and yet suddenly, like a ninja, he like executes this perfect perfect disarm of little mini me here, and just takes him down in a flash. I also never considered it, but there's a whole so of course we know that Michael Anderson, who played the little man from another place in the original Twin Peaks, he was asked to be in this and he declined. But it is interesting that we get, of course, we get the arm in a different form. We get again another kind of miniature man, who is more directly malevolent. But of course, what appears when Dougie disarms him, of course, it's the little ball bag on a stick that I don't think any of us like that much. Remember, but this was the replacement for Michael Anderson. The little what do they call it? The evolution.
The evolution of the arm
of the
is
arm.
in the
Yeah.
credits.
Yeah, and so it pops up here on the pavement, and it hisses, "Squeeze his hand off," in a most distressing way.
I was thinking about this this character earlier this week, and when we were discussing when we were going to do it. So earlier at the beginning of November, so a month ago, I bought a bag of discounted Halloween candy. I have a notoriously terrible sweet tooth. It's going to kill me one of these days. But I bought this like giant bag of blow pops. You know, the lollipops that have the gum in the middle.
I did as well.
I'm a big fan of them.
Yeah.
I don't like the regular like Tootsie Pop. I don't. It's the chocolate. I don't know. I want the gum is better. The gum is objectively better. But anyways, so as I stick my, I take care of the gum. I'm done with it. I put it back on the stick for some reason. And then I look at it and I'm like, oh, I understand where the inspiration comes from. Is there's this just stick some gum on a stick. That's the arm.
I never thought
it's gotta
Put
be
my gum on a coffee stir.
It's gotta
Put
be
on VFX now.
Well, we're gonna have to replace him. Let's be really mean about it. Yeah.
Make him shorter.
I can hear it in my head. Anyway, a good question, of course, is why would the arm help Cooper? Well, I don't know if it's actually helping him. Like, why is it telling him to grievously maim this guy? Like, is this help? It's not really helping. I don't know. It's a very curious little moment, and we don't really see what Dougie actually does to him, but it's terribly violent. Because of course we see the aftermath of it, where they're kind of peeling meat off of the gun at the crime scene, which is also strangely like this particular shot is got that weird elliptical vignette effect, which is very strange. But yeah, something terrible happens to Ike the Spike's hand in this scene, and I just think it's curious again, an arm injury for being called for by the evolution of the arm on a little guy who's sort of an analog for the old arm. I don't know, it's a very odd bit. And then of course we get the news broadcast. Well, we get reactions, so and in fact I think. They asked various people about, he just ran up with a gun and he smelled funny. And then I like this one, Douglas Jones, he moved like a cobra. And they asked Janie E, of course, and Janie E is, in the hot lights of the television news camera, gives her glowing assessment of her husband's capable defense, about how he also, saved other people there by sort of removing this menace. The fact that this was broadcast on the news becomes an important plot point in an episode coming up, because of course it informs some other people of Dougie Jones's continued existence.
Well, so does the evidence bag containing Ike's hand flesh. This is all just a long setup. But it also does show that there's still a piece of Cooper. We're reminded for a split second that this catatonic individual is still, at the end of the day, Dale Cooper.
Yeah, like again, these. Well, remember, there's a few things, like when he sees a badge, he sort of like, you know, he reacts to badges, he reacts to coffee, as we heard, he reacts here, you know, again, his, you know, the idea that, you know, you're such an elite agent that your training kicks in despite being a catatonic vegetable. Yeah, there's something curious about that.
Well, it's like, you know, so we're expanding the plot line now. Okay, so now we're, you know, I actually I like it. It's a good slow reveal. I'm just talking in terms of the technicalities of the narrative. It's a good slow reveal. Okay, so you just taking like the fish in a bag approach to storytelling. Okay, so now we open the scene a little wider up, and so now we have clear confirmation here. Like this is your actual first like real reveal that this is actually the real Cooper. You know, it's like, you know, it's sort of the sharks. The shark's fin peeking above the waves. I like it. It's good.
Yeah. And of course, also, as I said, you know, this, amongst other things that happen in approximate to this, you know, Janie E's even more infatuated. You know, I mean, her husband just, you know, just acted like a hero. And of course, you know, these are the things that, you know, this is what women want, obviously. Speaking of maybe what women want or don't want, we go back to the Great Northern, and I like this little subplot here, because in Ben Horn's office, he hears a sound, and you know, there's a, you know, they talk about how like they had various people kind of, you know, the maintenance like investigate this sound, and of course you hear it. It's like, you know, it's this like tone, and of course it's very much like the, what is that, Taos, you know, that there's these places where you can purportedly hear this kind of frequency. And have you ever heard the Taos hum, Sandbatch?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a bit like that. And of course, so we have the scene of good old Ben Horn and miserable actress Ashley Judd, although she's fine here, you know, actually sort of going around and listening and, you know, oh, where's this coming from? And of course, given Ben Horn's like previous incarnation as a real sleazeball, and of course, you know, in you know, his infidelity when he was married, and you know, of course, him being, I mean, the actor who plays Ben Horn is like literally about 90 years old. He looks quite good here, but you know, and then this very young secretary of his. It's like this whole scene is set up that, of course, they're going to have some assignation, you know, that of course he's going to, you know, whatever. I mean, many men would go for it, and she seems quite open to it. I don't remember if this is the scene where he literally says no, but there is another scene. I think there's another scene where that actually happens.
It's not here.
It's not here.
It is implied, but it's not.
It's implied.
Not sold.
Yeah, because it doesn't happen. I mean, nothing happens here. You know, again, it's the sort of scene where they would. I mean, look how the positioning here, and of course the lamp in the middle. Everything has a lamp. You know, and it's just the sort of scene where they would embrace, and of course they don't, which I think is important. And of course, as we learn, she goes home, I presume, to her husband, who is clearly who has like clearly some sort of terminal disease. There's a scene, yeah, her husband named Tom, and then of course he's suspicious. You know, why are you out so late? You know, whatever. But she also, I think,
he takes no shit either.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, and you know, I think this is also the scene where she where they get the key,
yes,
where the key which Jade, the black prostitute, had dropped in the postbox, and yeah, so they actually receive it, and there's some conversation about it.
That's the room where Dale Cooper was shot.
315, I think.
Yeah,
yeah, and you know, sweeping up at the roadhouse here. I just, this is notable to me because, of course, the actor who played Jacques Renault is playing one of his brothers here. And so it's just very interesting to kind of see him. He is no longer with him. His story, the actor's story, is quite sad because he obviously had not worked for a while, and Lynch sort of cast him, made this role just to give him a job. Yeah, he passed on subsequent to the show here. But he has a conversation, of course, with someone on the telephone, who is. I think they talk about prostitutes. I think.
Yes, and that they're underage.
They're underage, and of course, I mean, like all the Renault family, they were all criminals and scumbags. Jacques being kind of the worst one, but again, the family tradition goes on. And then, of course, at the end of the episode, we see that, of course, whatever sway Mr. C had over the warden, he's released from the prison. And of course, he meets up with our good buddy Ray, and they drive away in a car provided by the warden.
And Ray is the friend in the glove compartment.
Friend in the glove compartment.
That's what he asked for. He asked for a car and a friend in the glove compartment.
Right. Yeah.
Presumably a gun, but he's got Ray as well with him.
He's got Ray as well. And of course, we remember that there's a tense relationship with Ray, because, of course, I mean, remember all those episodes back when the woman, I think her name was Daria.
Yes.
Who was sort of Mr. C's gangster's mole. But Ray, there's that thing where I don't need anything, Ray. I want, that, like, there's that sort of moment where Ray's sort of joking, and it's clear. Then, of course, it becomes clear that Daria was talking on the telephone with Ray, and Mr. C knows that, of course, they were going to double cross him, and of course executes Daria. But so it's odd that Ray is going to show up here and ostensibly help the doppelganger to get away. So. And the last scene in this episode is one of those weird scenes. We're back at the Double R, and all seems well. Everyone enjoying their dinner, and a man rushes in the door and shouts, "Has anyone seen Billy?" And then he leaves, and then the episode ends. I don't remember if we'd heard of Billy before, if he'd been mentioned prior to this.
No, this is the first mention.
This is the first mention. Okay.
We haven't had any of the Audrey Horne Charlie dialogue yet, so this is the first time.
Yeah. Also, what confusingly, if you watch the DVD, the Blu-rays of this, they get the name wrong in the subtitles. I don't know. It's not. They don't use the word Billy, so it's a bit confusing if you're going by, because it's slightly indistinct what he says, when he comes in, because he's shouting and there was a lot of noise in the room. But so, any final thoughts about this episode?
This is just a big setup episode, in my opinion. There's a lot of payoff from it later.
I guess it's that, but it's also, at the time, one of the things I love, because it's one of the dullest episodes. Like, whack, sorry. At the moment when it's happening, because of the one that we're going to talk about next, I think it's interesting because he lands on a flat note. I'm always like really interested in tonality. Like what? And David Lynch was too. So he's also, to an extent, I think he's also thinking in terms of music. I think this is a very jazzy flat note to go out on. Because like you really do, you have this sense that what happens in this series is that was a curtain drop. It's a curtain drop right there. Okay. And then the curtain comes up on something else entirely. It's a beautiful sort of jagged edge to like have this very broken story, like be cut in half on like this, like very broken note. It's beautiful. I love it.
We had a weird anti-grace note at the end. Yeah, and I think, you're right, Prude. I mean, now that I think about it, almost every scene in this episode was advancing all of the plot lines. I think most of the plot lines in this series had a little push in this episode, and it was very, in a way, it was very much kind of a unnecessary, but perhaps slightly procedural episode.
It's because it's the end of Act 1, like Sandy says, like the curtain has just dropped, and the second act has yet to begin, and it opens up very strong. So we're rewarded both with setup, but also closure.
Also, this is very interesting because I did not notice this. If you pay attention, the patron's placement at the diner change in between shots, and Shelley, yes, because Shelley is looking around, like you can see her here. I did not notice that. I'll have to go back and look at that. That's very curious if that's true. I shall go check. I did not notice that. Interesting. I'll check it out. Well, unusually, we are going to do 2 episodes, if that's okay with you, gentlemen.
We're here for
it. Let's go ahead and try to get through this one.
We'll try to get through there's a lot to talk about in this.
I'm just anticipating,
Yeah. So this is of course episode 8. We're very near the midpoint. It's 18 episodes, so very near the midpoint, and this is of course got the subtitle "Got a Light." And I will say that when this was originally broadcast, like this is the one that people were talking about. Like lots of people, there was a lot of discussion about this episode.
because I go dig around shit, and because I am one of those people who's been, I'm one of those people who does not pay attention to, like, I don't know anything about like I didn't know anything about David Lynch, so I have none of the like Reddit forum history or anything like that. So I had no idea the whole time we're watching this what like the critical perspective on it was, and holy hell, this is the one that everybody talks about, and I think it's great. I mean, it's definitely great, but it gets listed as like, well, like the greatest episode of television ever, and I'm like, wow, that's high praise,
Yeah, no, and it certainly was. I mean, a lot of aspects of this. I mean, the cinematography, it's a really interesting piece of work, and I do think it's. I know you have a different favorite. It's certainly.
My favorite things are always chosen for the most, because again, actually, I don't like to compare myself to David Lynch, but I'm about to do it. I also like the thing that I just noticed a second ago, like the ending on the jagged note. I have a whole aesthetic concept of this that I call the theory of the blue note. Okay. And so like the things that I get obsessed with are not at all the things other people do. So like I'll like, I'm like the person who like looks at the flower in the corner of the painting and goes, that's a really cool fucking flower. And episode 12 to me is a very cool fucking flower. And that's the reason it's my favorite. This one is probably the best.
Yeah, not the building, but the beam. Not the garden, but the stone. Anyway, it's a little Stephen Sondheim for you. So of course we join Mr. C and Ray in the car, and of course immediately, that look, that's not a promising look, is it? But of course, Cooper immediately realizes that the car is all bugged up. It's got GPS tracking devices, whatever. I mean, it's kind of older car, but clearly, of course, obviously it had been prepared. I think then Cooper does something to kind of turn them all off with a phone, which he then like I think he throws one of them on a lorry is in front of them, to kind of confuse them, whatever. But then they talk about, they talk about Dahlia, but I think, but of course he lies. He's not going to say that he, that he ended that he ended Dahlia.
No, he's just going to heavily imply it.
He's going to heavily imply it. And
The farm. Like, okay, I was 8 years old once. I know what that means.
Oh yeah, he's gone off to live at the farm. He's happily running around. She bought the farm, bro. And of course Ray Ray knows what Mr. C is capable of, so he's got to be aware that that this isn't good. And of course, they stop, ostensibly so that Ray can, take a leak. And of course, he pulls out a gun and whirls around. But of course, Cooper has a gun. But of course, plot twist. The gun, the friend in the glove box, has been unloaded by Ray. Which again, I can't believe that Mr. C wouldn't be aware that this was going to happen. How much of the progression of this is known to Mr. C, or whether any of this was intentional or not, I don't know. But again, I feel like both of them saw this coming. But of course, and so Ray is right. I mean, he's got the loaded gun, and he proceeds to shoot Mr. C several times. And then, really unsettling moment. Of course, out of the smoke, all of the woodsmen appear. They seem completely oblivious to Ray, and of course, the light is, it's the very classic David Lynch strobe light effect, and there's lots of smoke, and they also are kind of fading in and out of view, like they're not quite there, and they're doing things to Bad Dale's body. They're kind of digging in the wound and sort of manipulating him. They seems like they're kind of mutilating him. It's also, again, it's not set. It's not set. You would think of how someone would do this, like another filmmaker. It's not set to kind of dramatic music. It's set to this weird, I don't know if you remember the music during this scene. It's just like these kind of low tones. It's not really music at all. It's a very strange choice, and of course the diegetic audio is really reduced. So you hear this sort of tones, but the ambient sound goes away. It reminds me, of course, of the scene in Mulholland Drive where they go behind the Winkies to and encounter that the thing behind the skip.
I got an extensive conversation.
Well, hang on, let me just finish the thought because I'll never remember. But yeah, and again, when he, of course, that character who appears in this series as Duncan Todd, I mean, that guy, but he basically drops over from cardiac arrest, and as soon, again, another filmmaker would have the big orchestral hit there or something there. David Lynch, of course, has this sound almost like all the sound is being sucked away, and then for the rest of that scene, it's as if if you've been swimming and you get water in your ears, and so everything is muffled. One of the things, of course, David Lynch was such a genius at was sound design, and David Lynch did the sound design for this entire series as well. So, but yeah, it's a very curious and very, very, it's a very much a kind of trademark of his. Sorry. Go ahead, Sandy.
No, that's it.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, you two were on the same note.
Oh. And so Ray watches this in kind of bafflement and horror. And we also see during the course of this sort of thing, kind of looks like some giant, sort of engorged spleen. But of course, you can see a little face in there. And as we learned in an early episode where Mr. C says, you're still with me, good. And there he is. But whatever diabolical thing that the woodsmen do to him, Ray jumps in the car and drives away. And he has a conversation with none other than Philip Jeffries, and in which he says that Mr. C's dead, basically. So we leave this whole scene, and we return to the Roadhouse.
But you see, there's like the Philip Jeffries thing. It's like, okay, what is the what's the alignment of this character? The fuck is going on with it?
Well, and of course, we learn that Philip Jeffries speaks to Cooper through that. Remember that sort of radio thing,
Right?
Like much earlier. So, and not in a kind of, not in a sort of a line. They don't seem like allies really. So, yeah, you get these various references to Jeffries, and it is quite curious. And of course, why would what's Ray's relationship to Jeffries as well?
Right.
But we go back to the Roadhouse, and of course, the Roadhouse in Twin Peaks, which seems to have a very advanced ability to book big acts.
Legendary acts.
9 Inch Nails, yeah. And so we're treated to 9 Inch Nails, and of course, this is Lynch and Trent Reznor had collaborated for a long time. I mean, way back into the days of Lost Highway, but even before. No, actually, it was right around the same time as Lost Highway, because Trent Reznor appears in the video for "I'm Afraid of Americans." If you've ever seen, sorry, not Lynch. I'm getting to the Lynch connection, but David Bowie's video for "I'm Afraid of Americans." Trent Reznor appears in that video, but also I don't know if they all met during that. It was around that same period. But there's a curious relationship between Reznor, who did some music for Lost Highway, and and Bowie, all the same period, and of course worked with Bowie right around the same time. So there's a very meta aspect to the Roadhouse. Yeah, are the 9 Inch Nails supposed to be the real life band? Or are they a fictional? Well, yeah. I mean, who is anyone in this series? Who knows? It looks like Trent Reznor to me.
I mean, either they're playing themselves or they are themselves. Like, they are introduced as the 9 Inch Nails.
Yeah.
I don't think, out of all the things that you can overthink for Twin Peaks, this is not one of them.
Yeah. And by the way, so they perform a song that I think is that Reznor wrote this song for the show. I'm looking here. Yes, it was written for the show. It was written for the show. She's Gone Away. It was the second song submitted, as David Lynch felt that their first was not ugly or aggressive enough, which is quite curious. And again, I think as with all these songs at the Roadhouse, the lyrics are either directly or obliquely refer to various aspects of the show. And then, of course, after this performance, we see, of course, Mr. C isn't dead. He stands up, quite bloodied and injured.
You can't kill what's not actually alive.
You can't kill what's not alive. Yes, indeed. Why? Yes. Why do you seek the living among the dead? So.
And that's a moral fable about artificial intelligence, by the way.
Curious. I never thought about the tulpas. Yeah. 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 Someone also points out that yes, Eddie Vedder is also one of the performers at the Roadhouse.
Dude, that's so Gen X. Like, David Lynch had a lot of Gen X friends.
All right.
Trent Reznor and man, we're gonna get Smashing Pumpkins.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I am right.
I'm right here.
I'm right in the middle of Gen X, my friend. Actually, I'm not even in the middle. I'm at peak Gen X. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'm a peak millennial. I get to hear shit from you about this all the time.
Yeah, because many of the other acts in the show are like millennial acts. At least
Yeah.
at least I got Eddie Vedder and Nine Inch Nails, neither of whom I really like that much. I was never a big fan of Nine Inch Nails because I always thought it was just a bit too dark and too evil in its own way. I did warm up to Reznor because he toured with Gary Newman, who is someone I like quite a lot. So I like the Gary Newman arc. But anyway, all of this, the present day, we suddenly leave behind, and of course, very much like a reverse of the Wizard of Oz, the story goes from color to black and white. And we find ourselves in the most clearly marked temporal shift. We're not to what year is it? Because of course we're given this information, almost as if this is a like we're watching a kind of one of these films. Of course,
White Sands, New Mexico. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, and of course this event was filmed, the real event, and here we are. And of course, anyone who has any knowledge of history, and particularly anyone who is interested in the progression of atomic energy and other uses for these technologies, yes, I mean this date will be well known because, of course, it's
such a wild cut in. Like, I mean, okay, I have a lot of theories about surrealism. Okay, and I don't know really. In fact, actually, somebody was telling me about this yesterday. I was like, dude, the word surreal lands on me like a splat because I don't know what the hell it means. But the best I can come up with is that it's like some sort of interruption of sense making, and if done well, if done properly and non-nihilistically, it leads to a higher order of sense making. And this may be the only time, judging by that definition of surrealism, it's maybe the only time other than in Inland Empire David Lynch actually gets it totally right, because he does actually, this seems to not make sense at all that this is happening, but by the end of it, it does make sense.
Yeah, and of course, if you're interested in kind of art historical connotations, not only art history, but in poetry and to some degree prose as well, but you can go back and read some of the Apollinaire, who I believe was the first person to use the term surrealism in French writing very early. I think 1910. 1912, something like that. And then André Breton, wrote a whole manifesto about it. But yeah, I mean, again, it's been so long since I've read any of these primary sources, but I do remember the kind of phrase, the new spirit. It's a, and of course, for some of them, they were kind of drawing heavily off of Freud and and other sources. There was a kind of the first kind of link between this sort of new quasi-scientific quote discipline of psychiatry and and this idea of kind of plumbing the depths of the human consciousness or the human soul.
I have a question about this, because you're framing it exactly properly. And actually on LMD I've been really my whole life, but especially the last year, I've been really interested in the abstract concept of romanticism. Okay. And one of the things is you just did right there is that you really bring into focus the source of the uncanny here. I think this is a really seriously a kind of emergence of a sort of neo-romantic sort of mode of storytelling. But what is the uncanny here? We eventually find out, okay, yeah, it's probably something okay, this is the day we have electricity. There's some new form of energy that's been brought into the world, Okay. And somebody was bitching at me on Twitter about this. Well, before we came on the air. And the thing, I said about it, because, whenever you shared the tweet from earlier today, and I said, the thing that's really interesting is but what is the source of the uncanny here? And what we're doing over the course of this sequence is actually sort of defining the strange malevolent force that is at work in the universe. It does, and because it's never given a name. So it like remains this sort of uncanny other. But like the thing that we do understand obliquely is that it has something to do with this like new form of energy that we've just like sort of brought into the world. Okay. And like has like sudden, large, measurable effects on our sort of collective behavior in ways that are totally unprecedented, you know? Does it make sense?
Yeah, I do think so, and so that's something that we'll get into. In fact, there was someone on Twitter who was sort of having a, or maybe in the same
Yeah, that's what I'm
person,
talking about.
having the go that it was about, you know, sort of.
It's like that Lynch has this problem with physics, or that it's like, you know, something like that. And I was like, I'm not seeing it here.
I don't think so at all. In fact, of course, you know, there are quite a number of videos where Lynch specifically, I mean, because we all know his interest in TM, transcendental meditation, and so he cites, you know, well, there are physicists who have discovered the unified field, this field of pure consciousness, you know, that like there are videos where he's literally linking his sort of belief in, you know, the aspects of transcendental meditation with, you know, again with this sort of scientist, which is weirdly very much like some of the early surrealists would have done. I looked it up here, and Andre Breton in his Surrealist Manifesto, he actually provides two definitions. One of which he calls the dictionary, one of which he calls the encyclopedia. Surrealism, pure psychic automatism, by which one proposes to express, either verbally, in writing, or by any other manner, the real functioning of thought. Dictation of thought in the absence of all control exercised by reason, outside of all aesthetic and moral preoccupation. And for the encyclopedic definition, he says surrealism, philosophy. Surrealism is based on the belief in the superior reality of certain forms of previously neglected associations, in the omnipotence of dream, in the disinterested play of thought. It tends to ruin once and for all other psychic mechanisms and to substitute itself for them in solving all the principal problems of life.
See, that's explicitly unhelpful. They're negating definitions. Look, Andre Breton was a cocksucker.
Oh, he was.
Like, I don't feel bad about saying that.
He was awful. I mean, notably, of course, throwing out Salvador Dali because Dali was not a communist.
Right.
It's really
literal surrealism's literally communist bullshit most of the time. So actually to give gotta go back and give Twitter guy that I was being dismissive of some credit. Oh well.
Anyway, so we are treated to a wordless what was it? So a wordless replication. Now, none of this is actually. This is not footage of the actual Trinity test. If people are not aware, the Trinity test was the first detonation of an actual nuclear weapon. So, I mean, and of course, this was very almost immediately it preceded the use of atomic weapons in Japan. But yes, and of course, as we learned, it happened on the 16th of July, 1945 at 5:29 a.m. And so it was
White Sands, New Mexico.
White Sands, New Mexico. And actually, I have visited this site.
You sure can.
You can pick up so there's a substance which is called trinitite. I believe it's trinitite, which is fused. It's basically a vitreous material of fused sand that occurred from the heat of that test, and it's all over the site, and you can ostensibly kind of pick up a piece of it there. But anyway, so this was a big thing, and of course, I think that, I mean, one of the things is all through, certainly Twin Peaks, and you know, we didn't get any sort of reference to necessarily to atomic energy splitting the atom, but the original Twin Peaks series was and Fire Walk with Me were both abound with references to electricity, and that is also a big concern in this series as well, as this again as the sort of. And I think it's interesting because I mean, just like, you know, electricity, again, unleashing the secret of the atom, literally, doing something that had only happened as natural processes of God prior to us figuring out how to do this. And they're both, again, things that are associated with so-called advancement, also like technological development, but they're also, I think, they have a very deep esoteric metaphysical nature as well, because of course both of these things, the advent and control, I mean the ability to control and generate and use electrical forces. I mean, we've known about electricity in one way or the other since the ancient Greek days, but both the kind of harnessing of electricity and then the ability to split the atom were both things that irrevocably changed human history, the world. And I think, of course, you know, certainly familiar to people, kind of reactionary people, maybe not for the better. You know, I mean, there's a kind of equal and opposite dark force aspect to both of these things. So,
well, I mean, this would be what, you know, Virilio would discuss as dramology, the study of acceleration, the study of speed, and not just speed as in, you know, the relative speed of like 65 miles an hour, but the speed in which society, both in social and political techniques, advances. And so this is where also you get the work in 2004, you know, like the original accident, wherein, you know, for everything that we invent, we also invent the accident, whether we know it or not. And eventually you're going to create a catastrophe. Again, sort of these like French new agey kind of philosophers are kind of bringing back catastrophism as a valid explanation for the development of things.
Hold
But
on,
I mean,
I gotta interrupt and point out that there is on my Substack that you can pay for a whole fucking article about catastrophe theory.
thank you for shilling. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for ruining my train of thought.
Oh, sorry about
you know
that.
what? Yeah, fuck it. You know what? Let
catastrophism.
no, the moment's gone. Let's just carry on. Fuck it.
Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. So, well, okay. Anyway, I mean, just very briefly to the sort of what's happening, film. You know, in the aspects of the film here. I also think that this whole sequence is a great sort of homage to Stanley Kubrick. Well, I mean, very clearly it is, for several reasons. I mean, of course, the style of it. Of course, we'll see in a few frames that you know, Lynch is clearly sort of using aspects, cinematic aspects that Kubrick famously used in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Also, of course, the music. So I don't know if people are aware, the music for this scene is a famous piece of music called the Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima, written by a Polish composer called Krzysztof Penderecki. And I quite like Penderecki. I mean, you know, info hazard, though. I mean, you know, be prepared if you're going to, I'm going to look up and listen to Penderecki's high. You know how there's this category called easy listening? I would say Penderecki's hard listening, you know. His early work, anyway, I mean, it is extremely discordant. It is not really based on traditional Western musical structures in any way. It's very interesting music. Kubrick loved it, and he used Penderecki in several of his films, famously, including The Shining, which he used a number of Penderecki's works. And in 2001, I believe there's at least one used. Penderecki, interestingly, in the late 70s and 80s, switched to become, and he switched modes, and he started writing all this neoclassical work. So it's very interesting listening to his late work compared to kind of the famous work. But yeah, the piece of music that you hear during the scene is called Threnody for the Victims of Hiroshima, which was written in response to, obviously, the United States use of the atomic bomb just a few short months after the Trinity test. And remember, of course, I mean, most people's first impression of anything to do with atomic science is its use as an unfathomable weapon of destruction. You know,
I'm actually thinking about this now, and I'm trying to think if the Trinity, the original Trinity footage would have been most people's first introduction. I think it probably would have. It would have been the Trinity explosion and not the Hiroshima explosion, I think.
I don't know about that because I doubt that any of this footage was released until much later on. I don't know, and I'd have to look into that. But I don't know when. I don't know when it's sort of. So I do know
Trinity. The film test for Trinity is not declassified until 1970.
Interesting.
So your first
yeah.
exposure is going to be the photos from the war
Yeah.
and any subsequent testing photos that were to happen. And also, like, if you go to the Trinity test site today, they have a very large amphitheater.
Yeah.
Which will play basically, I don't want to describe it as an anti-nuclear war film, but it is a very well done and put together sort of documentary on the history of nuclear testing and what the American government specifically had been doing. It doesn't mention the Soviets at all. It's very focused on just what the US had done. And I feel like that, because I saw it maybe when we went there when I was like maybe like 10 or 11 years old, and I could have turned into fucking Nick Bostrom if had I not read more research into nuclear testing after watching the film. Because for the longest time, I would say the film that they put up there is one of the scariest films ever made, just saying like, this is the unfathomable power in which man has unleashed. And the first thing we did with it was then experiment, and we still do to some extent for decades now, on how we can use it to cause widespread destruction of not just the human race, but the entire fucking planet. And they do a very good job at putting it together, like in a very clinical black and white with some colored archival footage, that this is what you're capable of. And I think in relation to what Lynch is doing here, and I think Mark Frost had talked about it in an interview at the time, was like, this is the closest thing you get to an origin story. And I'm very much reminded of that terrible 1990 film Begotten. It's not worth your time. I think it's kind of overrated. I think the sequel short films that Elias makes are better. But you're given this very strange, out of destruction and out of violence, the birth of the world, and sort of this, I don't want to use the G word, but it's kind of implied that mankind sort of taps into a very damaging experimental demiurgic force by the splitting of the atom. And I think Lynch is very clear about that in these following scenes.
You know, it's what the other, because somebody here says retroactively upstage Oppenheimer. And it is because he did it long before the Oppenheimer film. It's sort of interesting if you watch them together, because they both theoretically depict the Trinity test specifically, which, like, I think this is interesting because they're two totally different takes on it. Like, there's like no real attempt here to do anything scientific, and like the other one is like very sort of like clinical in its attempt to be. This is like an aesthetic take on specifically the Trinity test, rather than like an I fucking love science video of a nuclear explosion. I think that's really
and it's not, now the Trinity test was, I mean, I think they had something like 100 cameras, including one which was astoundingly high speed. I think it was, I don't know, maybe 5,000 or 10,000 frames per second, which for a mechanical film camera is the upper limit. I mean, you're not, the fact that they were able to have a camera that was capable of taking 10,000 frames per second is really kind of amazing. But no, so it was heavily filmed. I think that the color image that you see is fake. I mean, the color was added. There was one actual color photograph, but there were no color films taken of the explosion at the time because for various reasons. Of course, people knew that something had happened. I mean, they prepared a cover story. I don't remember what it was, but because they knew that certainly people in the vicinity of this, and by vicinity I mean within a few hundred miles, people saw the light from this, quite far away. And also it was detected, people with various, in fact, I remember one of the strangest bits of evidence that something had happened prior to, and because no one knew about atomic bombs until Hiroshima. Literally, they kept it as secret as they could. But Kodak had noted that a huge number of rolls of their film, all through all the different products that they made, film products that they made, were fogged. And so one of the engineers at Kodak said that there must have been some sort of radioactive event that literally fogged a huge amount of Kodak film that was, in the general area of the Trinity test. So it was big, and it was a big deal. And I would say it was, as we said, it's an epochal change.
So here's, it's just for information. The official newspaper, like the Gazette account of what happened, was a remotely the text is a remotely located magazine containing a considerable amount of high explosives and pyrotechnics exploded. That was the AP wire, like
wow.
3 hours after it happened. But it apparently broke windows up to 120 miles away.
I'm not terribly surprised. And also, of course, this. So, just as a side note before we move on, this was the moment where, after which carbon-14 dating no longer works. So basically, anything carbon-14 dating, it only works on organic material. By the way, you can't carbon date stone. But you can carbon date anything that was once alive, so fabric and wood and anything like that. And the way it works is called, there was a steady amount of this particular isotope of carbon in the Earth's atmosphere until the Trinity test, and after which, so nothing that was created after this moment in time can be carbon dated with any accuracy, because of course all the subsequent tests have completely skewed the carbon-14 distribution throughout the world. So again, it's interesting how much both physical and psychological impact came from this test.
Not to mention all the steel that you can no longer use for scientific measurements. Most scientific equipment that utilizes stainless steel has to be found from things underground or shipwrecked before the atomic bomb.
Before the atomic bomb, because the problem is, of course, steel, one of the components of steel is carbon, and of course the stable signature of carbon isotopes is changed. And
Do you know what the #1 source of that steel is in the world today?
Do tell.
This is weird that I know this. It's the sunken German World War I fleet off the coast of Scapa Flow.
So the Battle of Jutland is our biggest supply.
Yes.
Wow. Amazing.
Horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, again, I think that the 20th century, I would say that this event, along with a few other things, but there is something that I think of the 20th century as fundamentally evil. That this was a kind of moment where, I mean, obviously many horrible things had happened in the past, and there have been many, many dark centuries and epochs, but there's something just, again, about the nature of humanity, the nature of morality, the nature of really everything that just was inexorably altered in a bad way by the 20th century. It just seems the 20th century seems haunted by demons. And weirdly enough, I think this is a kind of meta aspect, or not meta aspect, but there's a kind of deep component of a lot of David Lynch's work, not just this. It is that the kind of both proximate comfort and, of course, the absolute terror that was everything that we associate with the 20th century, particularly this period, the war and the Second World War and afterward. You could call it a boomer thing, but I think it again, just like this test, it had echoes, it had repercussions that will stretch out forever and ever. Again, by exponential orders. It just sort of ripples through all of human history subsequent to this.
Yeah, there's always a before and after date when it comes to the bomb. I think it's particularly interesting. I mean, it's not meant to be a dig, but like you're older than myself or Sandy, and I think that you're the one here for us that has the memory of what that world was like in the sense of fear of the bomb, and maybe
Yeah.
not so much in the immediate aftermath in the
yeah.
1950s and 60s, but I mean, I know that I didn't grow up with it. I mean, for me, the things that I grew up with media wise about war was like the claim of a dirty bomb going off in DC, thanks to people over at the History Channel working with the Department of Defense to fearmonger. At the same time, about terrorism and 9/11. Like for me, that was the worldwide thing. Now, of course, the biggest nuclear weapon that could destroy the world isn't so much a nuclear bomb; it's a biological one with the third world. But that's a whole other discussion. But like it's a strange thing how that had radicalized like 3 generations of people as to how easily and quickly the world could end. And now it's virtually not talked about because the Cold War is over, despite the fact that all that material is out there and we're talking about testing again. It's very interesting that those generational memories play such a limited role in politics today in comparison to for 70 years, and even still for a lot of people, it is the the ultimate apocalypse that man has been able to create. Not although later now it's like gain of function research and shit like that, but I mean it's particularly something that I'm sure stained Lynch's psyche as it did for countless Americans and the whole world, for his generation.
Yeah, and certainly for mine. I spent almost 30 years in the 20th century, and I mean, I'll tell you. I mean, if you want an example, and of things that I was seeing, that were produced during my lifetime and that I saw when I was young, you can look up there's a series of British public information films called Protect and Survive, which were made between I think 75 and 80. And that they're absolutely horrendous if you watch them now, but you can kind of get there's some sort of thing happening. I don't know if you can hear the dog is going mental. So
It's charming.
I'll have to go check on it
It's a
in a
good
moment.
boy.
Girl. Anyway, yeah. So if you want to look up these films, Protect and Survive, it's basically this series of films that was meant to tell people how to survive a nuclear catastrophe. And so again, you think of well, it's a 50 boomer. No, this went on, and in America there was a film called The Day After, which I think is from the early 1980s, which was it was an atomic horror film catastrophe that was broadcast on television.
Did you mention the other one?
Which one?
The one that's the most terrifying, like just like flat out, like there's a winner here. What is the most terrifying installment in this genre? And it's that fucking horrifying BBC thing, Threads.
Yep, that's
Threads certainly. I mean, Threads was a bit more like Threads was like The Day After in that it was a drama. I mean, Protect and Survive was just public information film. I mean, I will always remember it in one of those Protect and Survives. It's like telling you all these things that when you go outside and how you should whatever. And it said if someone in your house dies, then then you should wrap the body in polythene, and the body should be removed, from and it tells you can take it out, you should take it outside, and if you can, you could bury it, but you have this very limited time which you should be outside. And I mean, and it's so matter of fact. It's just like a film telling you how to brush your teeth. Like it's just telling you how to bury your mum.
Yes, it's
children.
awful.
Yeah. And
everything about it. Like that is, I think that's a huge generational break. Like what Prude was saying, because I'm probably, God, I was born in '89, so I'm like pretty much about as young as anybody could potentially be and have no memory of this whatsoever. Like like you go like 2 years older than me, and like There's people who remember the fall of the Berlin Wall and shit like that. Like, I'm about as young as you could be and have like no memory of this. And it's fucking terrifying to me. Like you're just describing that. Like, you grew up in a world where like that was like shit people watched. The hell, you know? Oh man.
Well,
Sorry.
I mean, and so basically, I mean, from the Bay of Pigs incident until the end of the Soviet Union, I mean, this was a real. I mean, it was presented at least, and I think to some degree it was. I mean, there are several moments in history where the world came dangerously close to having atomic exchanges. You know, there's a really famous one actually that was basically prevented by like one.
That one Soviet colonel that's like,
yeah.
he like looked at the numbers and said, "Fuck this bullshit."
Yeah,
You know.
So really awful things. But yeah, I mean, and I think that this was new. The idea that there could be a world-ending cataclysm that wasn't like God's destruction of the earth or something like that.
You know what the underlying second terrifying innovation is that's implied by the atom splitting and implied by all of this. The other one is the invention of the Turing machine, which is it's in part because of the fact that it's the explosion of the atomic bomb is so outwardly noticeably horrifying. But the discovery of the Turing machine is the sort of like shadow innovation that accompanies it. Okay, so it's like sort of the other thing, the horror that's implied but not shown.
Yeah, and they were related, obviously. I mean, this kind of Bletchley Park and the kind of advent of this particular the Enigma machine in cryptography and Turing's own actual involvement in these projects were all related to, again, towards this larger idea of kind of monitoring what was happening with the Axis powers, and particularly in Germany, and with the development of atomic weapons.
Right, like, because you need the innovation. You need the ascendance of automated Bayesian reasoning to properly frame the horror of the atomic bomb. So the atomic bomb is invented possibly naively. Okay, this is the thing. So this is sort of a naive birth of evil, because sort of after this has happened. So you need the ascent of like sort of automated by game theory. Essentially, you need the invention of the game first before you birth the innovation that makes, by all understanding, every contemporary understanding of game theory, pretty much, is that like the innovation of the atomic bomb. Like, there are very few game outcomes that don't end with us all nuking each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that's really what the horrifying thing is like, we've broken the game such that we can now create things that can kill all of us.
Yeah, everyone at once. And again, that's obviously in previous times with different sort of conceptions of the size of the world and the existence of other nations, whatever. I mean, yes, there was cognizance that certain natural and supernatural things could, quote, end the world as was known to the people. But certainly by the 20th century, everyone had this concept of the world as this single entity, and I think that this was a fairly new thing. It's just not how people conceived of sort of existence. So yeah, it's a sort of
well, I mean, this is really where apocalypticism as either a genre of literature or even if it gets really separated from the divine. I mean, looking at yourself as ruins is a very Anglo tradition in terms of its literature and as well as its artistry. The English are the first ones to really start describing themselves. What would 19th or 18th century London look like 1,000 years from now, as if we were coming upon the ruins of Rome? And those depictions are quite something to look at, and it's very introspective. But when you look at the earliest forms of what you would call apocalyptic literature, this of course is around the time of our looking into things like ether and the expansion of germ theory. A lot of the things that are taking place are literature around either We're no longer around Napoleonic style warfare unleashes some kind of plague. It goes from the memory of the plague and the Black Death, or specific religious connotations. There's a French one I remember that's written where, you're given the opportunity to reproduce the species, but actually he refuses. And as he takes his last breath, the dead then rise and the judgment of the world comes. But as soon as we get after World War I, and especially after World War II, all of human literature about the apocalypse becomes the self-referential ideal in which we have usurped the power of God and we have the capability of wiping ourselves out. And this is still being explored today by people like Bostrom and Thomas Moynihan. But the literature has a demarcated shift after World War I, and then even more so after the bomb is realized as a weapon.
Yeah, and then of course World War One. I mean, still, was the advent of this idea of mass death at the hands, not of sort of like traditional ideas of weapons of war, but I mean, just thousands of people being killed with gas, and so there was a direct link between, again, science as as well, this sort of great aspect of human progress, but also was very early inextricably tied to to suffering and death. So there's there was a sort of a ramp up from the beginning of the 20th century up until this moment, and now of course, I mean, we still have, I mean, COVID was a great a psychodrama of apocalyptic thinking, I mean, and we saw the effect. I mean, and I would say, people talk about, the effect of, being afraid of the bomb and being afraid of all this. I would say that in a way, more damage was done in the short 3 or 4 years of COVID, of the entire COVID narrative, than was done by the slow drip of, again, the so-called boom of fear of the bomb. I mean, we nothing as drastic socially, civilizationally happened. Even again with the very real threat of nuclear annihilation, as compared to what our new fear of unseen biological horrors beyond our comprehension. So I think that this idea, people say, well, what was it like sort of living where there's constant fear of annihilation? Well, we still live with it, just in a different form. It's just like, it's like that. I'm going to be a real Gen X person. It's like that scene from Ghostbusters, where choose the form of your destructor, and well, is it going to be COVID? Is it going to be the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man? Is it going to be atomic annihilation? It's weird though, because of course it used to be the official public face of diplomacy, the United States government, the British government, all of this. No one in their right mind, it was always about, we've got to prevent nuclear war. We've got to stop this. And now, as you well know, because I've heard you speak about it, Prude, but you get so-called people in international politics who seem to just feel that they speak about atomic exchanges almost nonchalantly. It's just like, oh well, we'll give the Ukrainians we'll give.
Well, that's the passage of something. That's the passage of an artifact into history, is what that is. Which is like a really strange metaphysical shift. I think, Brood, you've read the Koselleck book, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. Well, which one did you read, just out of curiosity?
Which was the one that Gio and I covered? I think it's the one that you cite in your master's thesis.
That's Critique in Crisis. I feel like somebody, and I thought it was you, were going through Sediments of Time as well.
No, I've gone. No, so it is both. I've gone through both. Okay.
Yeah. Sediments of Time, actually, I think, is the best history book ever fucking written, and it's all about how these things sort of move from the space of experience into the horizon of and how through the individual, and how the individual then generates a horizon of expectation. So when something passes into historical fact, it's whenever the experience of it is gone, and it's entirely this sort of ghost entity, this ghost object category, which is history. So it's a historical object.
and like we have no ability to sort of recreate. There's none of the actual emotive power of the original thing is there. Like I look at like Threads like a good horror movie, like not really as though it's something that could actually happen, if that makes sense. That's like what that is like. Yeah, it's the whole and all that transtemporality, all of the things that I talk about basically about alternate temporalities are based on this. The dog.
Yeah, I've got to tend to do. Can you gentlemen just?
We can carry this on for a hot minute. Don't worry, Dee.
I'll go to the next slide just to set us up.
But I mean, like onto what you were saying though, Sandy. I think one of the things also to consider, like this goes back to oh God, who's the guy that Empire and Communication, Ennis. Like this is what he talks about when he's referring to like space and time-based communication. Like you can't make a ancient living memory work in an empire unless it is constantly being reified. And I mean, in a way, this is where you can kind of like talk about the post-war consensus, because we're always constantly reifying an experience that no one has almost any living memory to, because every person who was alive at that time or fought in that war is dead. So we have to constantly reify it through all forms of media and communication. But I mean, it's the same thing here with the bomb. Like we have various foreign policy advisors and think tanks that discuss the bomb very nonchalantly because it's always been something that's been gamified. We've never had to discuss it. And when I used to do all these sort of like geopolitical lectures, you know, like you had the bargaining model of war. And one of the things that a lot of writers had noted was like these models functionally don't work in a nuclear society. You can't have them because you have the ultimate bargaining chip on your hand, which is nuclear weapons.
Yeah, there's like rocks fall, everyone die button exists.
Yeah. Like there's no way else that you can have that negotiation. And so I mean, like with Lynch here, I think that not only are we sort of given this like sort of beautiful creation of a different world, but later on as the episode unfolds, like we're given now the founding mythos for how this world even comes into being. Because, you know, from the bomb, do we get Bob? The firemen are aware of it, and inadvertently to counteract that, we kind of create the anti-Bob, or we create a sort of sacrificial lamb, which later on becomes Laura Palmer. And again, like the world is then framed in the fact that like out of something that for generations we saw as the end, there was also something salvific to be created out of it, at least for the world of Twin Peaks. I mean, in reality, nothing really salvific has come out of it, despite our best attempts to say otherwise.
Right. And it's the first point, again, with reference to the transtemporalities, there is, from this moment on, the entire shape of this story is about these two sort of alternate temporalities, like coming closer and closer and closer together, and to determine whether or not they can actually touch is like sort of part of the sort of question that's posed by the Twin Peaks: The Return.
Hello, I'm back. Sorry about that. I had to murder the dog.
Yeah, she's dead.
Yeah, wrapped in plastic. Yeah. So by the way, so I as we were talking earlier, I was scrolling through, you know, bits, you know, shots from this scene, and of course, again, if you're familiar with the section of Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is called Jupiter and Beyond the Infinite, there's a very long sequence where Bowman, the astronaut, is in the pod and he is going through hyperspace. He is traveling, and he is seeing, of course, this extraordinary symphony of colors and lights and shapes, and which then, of course, resolve into, you know, sort of sea and coastline, and then, of course, you know, in fantastical colors. I mean, this was all, I mean, the kind of kit that Kubrick and the director of photography made to kind of do these extraordinary images. This is prior to the ability to generate any of this sort of thing. There was no digital, you know, kind of generation, certainly at that time. So yeah, and I think it's quite clear that it's Lynch's homage to Kubrick. And then, of course, I don't know if I mentioned it before, that there was an aborted moment where they almost met when Lynch was in the UK filming The Elephant Man. Kubrick, someone in Kubrick's circle had obtained a print of Eraserhead, and Kubrick screened it, and he loved it. In fact, at the time, he said it was his favorite film. And so he heard that Lynch was in England directing The Elephant Man, and so he sent a message. Actually, I think he maybe even he had one of his people call, and finally he got a hold of Lynch and said, would you want to come to my compound at St Albans, and I'd love to meet you. And Lynch said no. For some reason, I think he described it as a combination of being very busy and also being very intimidated and being suspicious of what Kubrick wanted from him, which is very odd. I think he subsequently regretted not meeting Kubrick, but no, and of course they were mutually loved each other's work. Kubrick really did like Eraserhead and reportedly other later works of Lynch. And Lynch has said that one of his favorite films was Kubrick's Lolita, which is a very interesting choice. But anyway, I do think a lot of this sequence is a kind of direct homage to Kubrick. But anyway, then of course we go from the this sort of all this wonderful abstraction, this cinematic abstraction, to the convenience store. And I don't know if you gentlemen talked anything about the sudden appearance of this, and of course, it's just this by all accounts abandoned building, but suddenly, of course, through this extraordinary sequence of flash frames and time manipulation and cuts and strobes and smoke, of course, we see the figures of the woodsman scurrying about.
It has a very stop motion feel to it.
Yeah, it's filmed in a very strange way, and very sinister, of course, because we know about the quote convenience store. I mean, the whole sort of implication, and this is something that came up with Fire Walk with Me, over the store. I had he stole the corn. I had it canned over the store. And Philip Jeffries, of course, I've been to one of their meetings. Convenience store. I don't know. Very odd. And very anachronistic, because certainly, I mean, if present in 1945, I don't think the term convenience store had appeared until probably the 1970s. So an odd moment. So after, of course, seeing the kind of generation of the woodsman, then we see this extraordinary image, which is a figure that looks very much like the figure that appeared in the glass box, if you recall, that did something very savage to Adam and Judy, or no, Adam and Tracy, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, and it looks very much like that. And of course, we see that this projectile emerges from its mouth. Again, this is one of the really fantastic images from this show.
It's very interesting. It's credited as the experiment, and it has a very kind of this androgynous, slightly it's horned. It's birthing by regurgitation. I'm sure that there is a mythological mother figure that I don't know about that's probably been referenced here that I don't know.
I wonder, I actually just reading about there is a frog. There's a species of frog where I believe the female swallows the fertilized eggs and they gestate in the frog's stomach. I suppose frogs have stomachs. And then they are regurgitated as tadpoles, So basically, they are, because most frogs, they fertilize eggs they're on their own in these sort of little slimy pods, and many of them don't survive. They hatch into tadpoles themselves. But there's apparently a species of frog that actually sort of keeps them safe in the tummy. I just read about that, which is And given, of course, there is a frog. There is a frog who we will meet, a sort of frog. Curious, but yes. So as someone noted, within this trail of, and actually, if you've ever seen frog eggs, it looks very much like this. You know, these little nodules in a sort of sack of slime. But and so yeah, there he is. Any thoughts about this?
Well, Bob is being born out of one of these. Let's just call it like a fertilized egg sac or something like that. If we want to keep the amphibian metaphor going, but to me, this also represents that like Bob is not the only entity, or if Bob is the only entity that is being birthed, then we have other timelines that are or potentialities that are being birthed here. Because as we famously ask throughout this series, more than the original, obviously, is what time is it, or what year is it, or what kind of questions are we asking about spatial as well as with time and location. Like we have an point, we have an origin point, but we also have limitless potentialities being unleashed literally by atomic fusion. I don't know. I think there's something there to it.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
Considering what happens later.
And so then we sort of go back to these kind of bursts of color, which, seem very much like kind of images of, false color images of nebulae and such. And what do we see also? We see this gold seed, which seems a bit like we've seen at least a version of this before when poor Dougie Jones version 1 had fulfilled his purpose and was returned to a seed. And then we get this drastic shift. And again, if you watch that Jupiter Beyond the Infinite sequence of 2001: A Space Odyssey, all of the real abstract kind of images, eventually give way to very, very wildly colored images. Some of them are inverted, some of them are mirrored, but it becomes clear that you realize that suddenly you're no longer looking at just abstract shapes and colors, but you're looking at like images of the camera, flying above the sea, or flying above the desert or whatever. And the flying above the sea reminds me, of course, where we go next. We find ourselves back in the purple waters. We remember when Dougie when Cooper fell out of existence and landed in that building in this infinite purple sea. This, as Lynch called it, the unbounded, limitless field of consciousness. But of course, we see another structure here, not the one that Cooper fell into, but we see high on a rocky protuberance. We see this this strangely Art Deco-ish fortress.
That's where I tweet from.
Oh,
this is where we all tweet from.
Based
This is where every single one of us tweets from.
I wish. And in a very David Lynch shot, which is reminiscent, if people recall, in Blue Velvet, and also there's a shot in Eraserhead where David Lynch loves these tracking shots that go into holes, and so like in Blue Velvet, there's famously a couple of those shots where it goes into the ear, into the severed ear. The one in Eraserhead goes into the planet, famously. But there's one in the original series of Twin Peaks which actually comes out of a hole, which ends up being a square of acoustical tile on the interrogation room at the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Office. So yeah, there's these unsettling things. But here, of course, the tracking shot goes into a little window in this fortress, and we meet some old friends. Well, actually, we meet a new friend. Now, this shot is very interesting to me, and I don't know what it means, but I have a theory about one of the props in this scene. Okay, we hopefully we lost Prude. Hopefully he will return.
It's gone.
Yeah, so we meet this woman sat in this room here. And we see, of course, the gramophone, which we saw in the first episode of this series. But I could not help but notice that metal screen you see sat in front of the sofa. You see it?
No, I don't see it. What the hell? Let me full screen it.
You see it's
okay, yeah. I see it. Yeah.
Right next to her. And so, of course, someone who has done quite a bit of sound editing in the past, I cannot help but notice that those are square waves. Those are like literally sound waves. At least that's how it looked to me. And of course, with a kind of helix, with a kind of double helix in the center. And I again, I'm not sure. For me, it's the kind of relationship between the gramophone and the screen, the screen of sound.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely sort of representing an environment of waves. There's lots of waves everywhere, and you have representation of all. Like there's an electric light, there's a light waves, and then there's the gramophone that's sound waves. So we're surrounding ourselves with and this is like for the same reason. I'm one of those people that whenever I go to sleep at night, I actually unplug my wireless, put it because I'm concerned about the level of just radiative waves that we deal with all the time. One of the things I pointed out whenever I was talking about this earlier on Twitter is again, just look at the light. This white light, people exposed to white light for extended periods of time develop all kinds of very predictable behavioral abnormalities. So I mean, these are all things that are quite literally in some respect poisonous. That are you're looking at the poison lodge,
Yeah, and of course, I mean, and of course, he just gave us a massive clue, because what did we see before we went in this? Well, of course, waves, and now we're seeing again the screen, which is just to me is very clearly square waves. I can't quite see it on this still. I'd have to enlarge it a bit, but and then of course, something that we mentioned on one of my Twitter Spaces recently is the idea that of course, if you come down to it, I mean, everything is almost every force that we know about is a wave, is at least to some degree a function of wave. And now I know, of course, photon, there's the kind of photons and all that, but this idea that everything is a frequency, whether it be sound waves or light waves, or and even of course electricity, the transmission of electricity. If you think about the floor of the Black Lodge, what is it? Well, it's literally
right.
stylistic lightning bolts, electricity. So there's something very curious going on here about sound and about waves. And again, the gramophone. And remember, in the first episode, I made much of the thing where the fireman says to Cooper, listen to the sound. And of course, it's that weird scratching, that faint scratching noise, which you hear in a later episode. But very curious to me, this character. I learned, of course, her name is Senorita Dido. I think she's referred to as such in the credits. I'm not sure.
Well, she's certainly built like a senorita her age.
Indeed. But we learn, of course, that she is here, and she's some sort of companion of the fireman, aka the giant. And that thing, that sort of, it looks like some sort of pressure vessel, but it also looks like an electrical insulator. It's actually got two ceramic insulators on the top of it. We saw that. We saw one of those in another scene on this purple sea when remember when Cooper went on the roof of that thing with the eyeless woman, and then she pulled a lever on it and it fell off and into space. So Yeah, I don't know if anyone has any other thoughts about this. Oh, all right. Welcome back, Prude, by the way.
Thank you.
But
My service dropped for a minute. What the hell happened?
yeah,
Yeah, same.
yeah, it's a very weird.
I'm in a very. It's like I'm in the middle of a thunderstorm.
Yeah. So anyway, so the fireman enters, of course, another favorite trope of David Lynch, of course, a theater. Actually, I learned that this was filmed in the same place as the Club Silencio in Mulholland Drive, if you recall, which is a scene of
It's like the China Theater or something like. It's a famous theater.
It's not Grauman's Chinese theater. It is some theater. Yeah, it is some theater in Los Angeles, I think. But anyway, of course, then the fireman goes in here, and what's playing on the screen? Well, it's the Trinity test. And of course, he also sees Bob, and of course he ascends into the air. Yeah.
So like this whole thing, it's like like we're inside one of these like droplet alternate realities or something like that. It's like totally isolated from what actually happened. But it's like seeing. So I was talking about temporalities converging. It's like they're close enough together in this moment that they can like see into each other. You know.
Yeah. But again, I mean, this sort of also brings the question: what is the fireman? Who is Senorita Dido? Like, what are their roles here? What is this theater? You know, again, there's plenty of literary metaphors for the kind of, you know, all the world, from all the world's a stage, and you know, but also the theater as a kind of microcosm of the universe, of the world, of the human world, and of course the importance of theater all the way back to the classical days. And you know, I mean, again, I mean, even it's beginning with Eraserhead. You know, there's famously a whole scene where there's a theater inside of the radiator where Henry, played by Jack Nance, sees the woman perform in heaven. Everything is fine on a little stage, and then step on some spermatozoa and squish them. So yeah, the kind of theater thing is also a very recurrent David Lynch trope. But Senorita Dido comes in and sees, of course, the fireman ascended in the air, and then he emanates this golden light, and we saw like little bits of this earlier mixed in with the Trinity sequence. But he's sort of generating this from his head. I quite like these shots. This whole thing is really beautifully filmed. But then, of course, Senorita Dido, as a kind of foil to him, goes over and picks up a glowing orb or globe, with a similar kind of golden light to it. And what does she see in the globe?
The most haunting cinematic image of my entire year.
the high school photograph of Laura herself. And so of course she again generates this, and she sort of lovingly gives it a kiss, and then launches it into the air, and you can see this absolutely extraordinary, almost kind of steampunk Art Nouveau. I don't know. There's this sort of
this Art Deco. That's like
this machinery, but it's also this sort of like fantastical machinery, and of course the orb enters the tube. And then we see, of course, very 1950s image of the kind of globe that you've seen in many sort of educational films and whatever. And we see the golden Laura Palmer orb descend to the earth. So again, there's a question of how does this theater temporally relate to anything that we've just seen? Like, is this happening in some kind of place out of time? Is this something happening right after the kind of Trinity test? I mean, obviously, of course, what we saw was that this was some reaction to the generation of Bob, and so I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of, in one way, I kind of like treating these sequences not so much as, well, we've got to find the key to one. It's very much like in Mulholland Drive. Like, like you have the key, and what you need to find is the lock. And when you find the lock and open it, what do you get? Do you get the answer? No, you get darkness. You get literal darkness completely enveloping the story. And so again, I don't so much, my inclination with these sorts of things, a lot of people want to figure it out. What does it mean? What does it mean? I like to view these, and certainly I think it's commensurate with Lynch's work, as, again, dream imagery.
Right.
I mean, I don't.
Well, there's
I don't,
dream imagery. There's dream logic too.
yeah, there's a logic to it, and I think, of course, but again, I am the person. I don't want the mystery to be solved. I mean, very much like David Lynch. I mean, the point of Twin Peaks was not whodunit. Like, in fact, when he was forced to reveal who did it, that was just over. Like, what's the point of it anymore? Then the story just collapses into the end of a simple narrative. And so I just, my inclination with art and cinema, whatever, and I maybe have a different view because I'm on the creative side of that, and so I never talk about my own work in terms of meaning, and so I tend not to want to talk about other people's work in terms of meaning. I'm interested in what they've shown me, what is there. So anyway, but a lot of people have speculated endlessly about this. I avoided reading it because, again, I don't want to be sort of influenced by someone else's attempt to explain this, but I thought it was beautiful, this sequence. And then we find ourselves in a later date, 1956, August 5th, New Mexico desert. So 11 years after Trinity, and what happens in the desert on August 5th? Well, we see an egg.
The egg hatches. The hell egg hatches.
Yes,
there's like no indication. Like there's like no. One of the things is like may not be clear what's happening here, but there's like no way whatever comes out of that thing is going to be good. Like,
no, very clearly, and of course, even in the the kind of logic of cinema. Generally, when something strange, when there is an egg, a strange egg, nothing good happens. Also, I note, again, back to the sort of wave function. Again, we get the these stratifications of the sand being acted upon. Again, analogous to all these images of waves that we've seen, literal waves in the ocean. But what comes out of the egg? Well, it's hard to see it there, but meet my favorite character, the frog moth. And if you could blame the entirety of this narrative on anything, I think it's the frog moth. Now, if people are not familiar with David Lynch lore, you've got a treat, because if you go to YouTube and you look up frog moth, you will find a very amusing animation with David Lynch narrating a story about the origin of the frog moth. And he actually told this story several times in his life, but he claims that at some point in the past, I don't remember when it was meant to have occurred, quite a long time ago, was he in Czechoslovakia? I mean, this would maybe have been back in the 80s. I don't know. He was somewhere in Eastern Europe, of course, and he claims to have seen these, what he describes, frog moths, which are, and when you look at that thing closely, a beautiful job of whoever designed the CGI of that. It looks great. Looks better than almost any of the other CGI in this whole series. But yeah, it's like a cursed winged frog. Croatia. Yeah, yes, he was in Croatia. That's nice. In the Czech Republic, traveling to Venice by train, which I don't. Yeah, I guess you can do that. But anyway, so there we go. There's the frog moth.
It's funny too because that's not the only culture or area that has an animal described like that. So do the Chinook Indians.
Oh, really? Ooh,
Yeah.
I didn't know. Oh, I didn't know about that.
They have they say at some point in time long ago, I think it's in one of their creation myths, that there were spirits carried by frogs that could fly.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, just again, because of the lighting of this and because of the circumstances and because of the way it moves.
And it's a full moon.
It ain't good. It just ain't good. No. And then we join these two. Now, I know that there is a lot of speculation about the identity of these two people. I don't necessarily subscribe to it. Do you gentlemen know what I'm talking about here?
Oh no, you talk about this sometimes. Just spell it out though.
Well, I try to avoid reading people's theories about this, but somewhere I did come across this where some people think that this is Sarah Palmer. Yes. Now
I thought that on my first viewing.
Yeah,
too.
I do wonder about that. I think there's less of a case to be made that this is Leland than Sarah Palmer because he's obviously very brown. Okay, Maddie G. Her ID is in The Secret History by Mark Frost, which I've never read, unfortunately. Well, maybe fortunately. Yeah, Mark Frost actually spells out a lot of things that I think maybe are his ideas alone, and probably
like Mark makes it clear that he wants this to be Sarah Palmer. And I mean, if you read the final dossier, then like that's where you're going to get it from.
Okay.
Which I mean, I've read it, and you know, Mark explicitly it says that this is Sarah Palmer.
Right. But and as much as I respect his contribution to Twin Peaks,
as much as I respect his contributions.
But I mean, there's another person who, of course, never spoke at all about any of this particular stuff. So who knows? But yeah. So they have a little. I mean, she finds a penny, I think, and you know, they have a
face-up penny.
A face-up penny. They have a little moment.
Those are the pennies to take.
Yeah, and you know, you're not going to have any pennies anymore. And yeah, so you know, they have a little moment, and she returns to her home in this this strange little Dust Bowl town. And meanwhile, we see a human figure descending from the sky. One of the things I like about a lot of the shots that occur in this episode after the Trinity is just how dark. I mean, I didn't do anything to lighten these. I mean, these are really dark.
Yeah, they're very grainy. And I don't know what, I guess they would know because they're television, so it's not film. But it's like it's like Inland Empire grade grainy.
Yeah. No, yes, and I know that Twin Peaks Return was shot on it was digital format, so but you know, but there is a lot of grain applied to this particular episode. I mean, partially, but maybe for the, you know, the kind of the kind of that it's sort of calling to mind, you know, the idea of time past as represented by the idea that the past is always in black and white. You know, one of the reasons I brought up The Wizard of Oz, of course, is that this was a film made on the literal sort of point where color film, it was really just after the advent of color film. And so, but of course, at that time, the idea of seeing monochrome, black and white, it was not coded as, oh, this is old. You know, now and anytime anyone uses black and white, it's almost always sort of like I'm coding this as either being art, as it's me being aesthetic, or it's me conjuring up the past, because of course we young people only know the past, particularly the distant past, the 1950s, 40s, 30s,
Or
whatever,
me having no budget whatsoever, but we know
as
he's got a budget.
as black and white. Yeah, I mean, well, in digital, it's there's no difference. You can make it. You only make it black and white if you want to, and that's been the case for. I mean, certainly, but by the 1960s, there was no reason to film anything in black and white anymore, and most people gave it up, and it did become a kind of aesthetic choice. But anyway, and so yeah, we see this figure descend, and then we see that there's a couple driving along on a road, and there's a kind of sort of like a traffic jam. There's like something has happened that's caused them to have to kind of slow down or stop on this highway. And of course, who comes up to the window?
Got a light.
But one of the woodsmen, who in one of the creepier. I mean, this is certainly one of the creepier kind of images. Yeah, got a light. And because of the kind of way that these characters are kind of styled, again, I get a very strong sensory, like I can just imagine the sort of smell of like a damp, like burnt out campfire. I just imagine the kind of odor here. And of course, again, where there's smoke, there's fire. Again, are you gonna light the spark? And these are very sinister characters. I mean, we've seen them. We've seen them mutilate people. We've seen them do all kinds of terrible things. But yeah, it's a really good moment. And of course, these people, he doesn't give him a light, and he speeds away in fear because, a bit Abe Lincoln. Yeah, a bit Abe Lincoln. And then, of course, this character wanders into the distance, and what do we see in the distance? Of course, identifiable to any old head, is a radio station, KPJK. One little bit of behind the scenes hilarity about this is that there's a little video of David Lynch talking about this set. Actually, there's video where they're actually filming this scene, and David Lynch is laughing about the fact that that he basically has a blank check, and he said that when Showtime learned that this set cost $500,000, they were absolutely horrified. Like, it's just hilarious him talking about how expensive this one set was. Which is astounding, certainly for a television budget for a set. So there we go. Oh, Lynch hired an actual Lincoln impersonator for that role. I didn't know that. Amazing. Well, Lincoln's certainly a sinister figure. And so then we get, of course, this sort of intercut. Obviously, scenes proximate to this radio station, scenes proximate to the young girl. Here she is in her room. I mean, again, very much coded, with the kind of 1950s. It's not so much the kind of slightly affluent cowboy 1960s or 50s of Sonny Jim. It's more of a kind of a more modest means, a girl's room. And of course, she's got her lamp with the bow on it. As everyone has their own lamp. But she, again, listening to music, wistfully thinking about her encounter with the young man that we saw earlier. And then we get another scene of course, a stout matron cleaning up at Pop's Diner, which I can't help but also see, maybe that might be a bit of a far-fetched. I don't know. It just makes me think of kind of an analog of the double R.
I thought that was very intentional.
Oh, okay, good. It's not just me. Just the form factor of the counter. But again, in a previous world, and they're all listening to the radio, all tuned into the waves. They're all getting they're all got the frequency, and the fireman, of course, encounters the secretary at the radio station, and let's just say things don't work out very well there. So he dispatches her by basically crushing her head. And then he goes into the into the booth and crushes the head of the DJ. And yeah, a very again Lynchian shot of reflection on the splash of blood and gore on the floor there. And then in one of the most famous lines from this whole episode, he takes the microphone and he proceeds to say, "This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full. You know, the horse is the whites of the eyes." He says something else too. I think I cut one frame out to just have the full there. But yeah. And the effect of this, of the, there's a mechanic listening to it. There's of course the young girl who we just saw. There's the woman at the lunch counter. The effect of hearing these repeated phrases is that they all drop unconscious. This basically lulls them to sleep. This voice through the air. Do any of you have any thoughts about this particular poem, this particular koan?
Oh, no, I've been sitting here trying to parse it, and I got nothing. I told you sometimes, David. Sometimes he does these infuriating things where he will insert this is why I'm not the biggest fan of surrealism. But I'm like, I'm sure this means something, but I have no clue what.
Prue, do you have any
I don't. I really wish I had an answer. The only thing that I can think of is the horse. Is he referencing the horseman of the apocalypse? I don't know.
Well,
and I don't think that Lynch or even Mark gives an explanation to this, which I'm fine with. I don't need. Well, I mean, I want an explanation. I would love one, but I know I'm not going to get one either. But like to drink deep of it. Okay, well, what am I drinking deeply of? Just the words that are being said. Fine, so be it. That's fine with me. I don't have an issue with that. I just want to know what is it that I'm, dealing with here, and I don't get an answer.
Yeah, the phrase I cut off, by the way. So the whole thing is, "This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and descend. The horse is the white of the eyes and dark within." Now, of course, what I can think about only the image that came to me is, of course, there is a white horse in Twin Peaks in the original series, and of course in this one. If you recall, actually, I used it as a thumbnail for one of the earlier episodes of this. It's the horse in the infinite. Well, the red curtains of the red room sort of part, and we see an infinite. The floor, the Black Lodge floor pattern spread infinitely into the darkness, and there's the white horse. And remember that Sarah Palmer herself had visions of a white horse. In fact, I think she had it a couple of times, and it preceded bad things, including, of course, the death of her daughter, and also the death of Maddie Ferguson in the original series. So, and there are other white horses. In fact, you will see one represented in the final episode of The Return. You'll see a reference to it. So that's the thing I can think of. And of course, if we're going to think that maybe that young girl is Sarah Palmer, there's perhaps a relationship. But and the other thing, of course, I mean, if you think more broadly to Lynch's other work, is that one of the lines that Frank Booth says to Jeffrey Beaumont, played by Kyle MacLachlan, is "Don't shoot till you see the whites of the eyes." So that again is something that seems to come up with Lynch. At least I don't know if there's any relationship there. And then, of course, he wanders away, into total darkness now. And this episode ends with, I would say, another one of the very disturbing images in the whole series. So we see the young girl unconscious on her bed, And there's the frog moth. And what does the frog moth do?
Yeah, what does the frog moth do? Oh my god.
Well, open wide. Yes, and she opens her mouth. And for me, now, I don't want to, but going back to Kubrick, there is an implication. I will at some point do streams about Kubrick films. We've been talking about doing them for years. I mean, back when we were going to do them on AA's channel. But one of the things about The Shining, which I don't think a lot of people know, is that there is an implication in the film. It's more explicitly spelled out in Stephen King's novel that, of course, that Danny is also being molested by Jack Torrance, and so Kubrick never actually says it, but all the kind of symbolism, particularly like he talks about the little boy who lives inside his mouth and goes down into his stomach to hide from adults. And then there's, of course, a scene where he gets mauled. He goes into room 237, and his father also goes into room 237. And of course, we don't see what Danny sees in the room. We do see what Jack Torrance sees, which is, of course, a naked woman who comes out of the bath, and then, of course, whom he embraces, and then who, of course, turns into a rotting corpse of an old hag. But then Danny then the next time we see Danny, he's wearing this jumper, which has a rocket on it, which points right up at his mouth, and it says Apollo 13. And that's when, of course, he comes back again, drooling and catatonic. The sweater's all torn. He's slightly injured. Like something happened to him. And of course, Wendy Torrance is there, and she's like, "You did this to him, you son of a bitch!" And she takes Danny away. And of course, Jack sits there looking, whatever. So there is a terrible implication about molestation. And I think, again, a young girl passed out on her bed, and this sort of horror crawling into her mouth. There's something very unpleasant about this image for me. I was going to use this as the thumbnail because it actually worked very well, but
he's sort of the king of one-off, genuinely disgusting images.
Yeah.
Every time he does vomit, he spends way too much time on it too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, the Gomombo Zia mixed with the oil. Yeah, that's a memorable moment. Yeah, but I do think that this is a particularly horrible image. And then of course, she shuts her mouth, and that's the end of God of Light. And this is something that some people say leads credence to the idea that this is young Sarah Palmer. That, as we learn, things aren't well with Sarah Palmer in Twin Peaks: The Return, which we will see very soon. In fact, one of my favorite characters is Sarah Palmer in this, because I think Grace Zabriskie is the most terrifying. Like, she is capable of being really scary. Remember,
she's the final boss of my mom's.
Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned to me, of course, I mean, she does that thing with her jaw, like, I mean, she's from New Orleans, by the way, Grace Zabriskie.
Right.
So, and of course, she also plays one of the most horrible characters in Wild at Heart. I don't remember her name, but she's the one with a leg brace that, yeah, anyway, with that horrible scene with Harry Dean Stanton.
Right.
Anyway, but of course, she does a stellar performance in Twin Peaks: Return. But again, the idea is that the frog moth was some entity, because we know that, of course, Leland was the scapegoat. Leland was also, I should note that Leland in the original series talked about being the scenario. Do you remember Leland describes meeting Bob when he was a child at his parents' lake house, and he describes it very much in the way that a child who had suffered sexual abuse describes the origin of it. They met this man, the neighbor, who asked me to well, in fact, he said, do you like to play with fire? And then Leland sort of does this thing with these matches, and he said that's what this guy that looked like Bob did to him when he was a child. And of course, the implication also is that Leland was first possessed as a boy by whatever Bob is. And so I think, again, as a kind of mirror to that, the implication that Sarah Palmer was also entered by a dark entity when she was a child. And then, of course, I think one of the interesting things that Lynch does with Sarah Palmer's character is that in the original series, she's kind of a hapless mess. She's just a kind of totally neurotic, chain smoking, drunk, popping pills and passing out. And that there's an implication that perhaps she knew what Leland was doing and she didn't stop it. But I like that, of course, the development here is that it places more blame on her as a character for what happened to Laura than was done in the original series, which I think is a curious thing. And often the case, again, when you read about, you've heard, again, stories of survivors of abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, there is, it's sometimes either complicity or willful ignorance that one of the parents kind of turns a blind eye to what's happening. So anyway, some dark things, but I do think that it's implicit in some of the imagery here. And it's part of Laura Palmer's story. I mean, again, the whole thing is that she, that Bob had she even says in Firewalk with Me, he's been having me since I was 12 or something. And so, well, do we have any other words about this episode?
The screen caps don't do it justice. You really should watch this in full.
100%. I mean, you should certainly watch the whole series in full.
Well,
because,
yes,
but
you could almost watch this episode as a standalone.
Yeah.
I don't want to entirely say, you don't have to treat this as the origin story to Twin Peaks. I don't recommend that you do. But if you wanted a story that offered, just this cosmological origin story in one take or in one film or one episode of television, I would recommend this one just because you get a world that kind of just gives you an entire cosmology based off what does man unleash at the Trinity test. I think it's very good.
Yeah. And I sort of feel like after talking about it, I still feel like there's a lot in this episode that I feel like we didn't really get at, and in a way, I think
there's no way to cover it because it changes every time you look. It changes every time you talk about it. It changes every time you look at it.
Yeah,
one of those things is really difficult to get to the bottom of.
But in a way, of course, that's the mark of great cinema. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't it's like a painting. Like if you can convey all of the aspects of what is happening in a painting with an essay, and why make the painting? If you can convey everything in a film, and of course, film is this sort of marriage of, as David Lynch said, who started as a painter and then discovered that he could that there was again more layers of creation available to the filmmaker because you're making pictures. In fact, there's a David Lynch documentary called Pretty as a Picture, but it also, as we know, Lynch was from the very beginning very interested in the sonic universe of these films, and was designed the sound for Eraserhead all the way up to his final work. So again, there's a lot happening with again that happens in theater, that happens in cinema. It's not meaning that you can convey in the script. The script is another thing. There's a narrative as well, but there's all kinds of things. There's all kinds of art, for lack of a better words, flowing out of this. And of course, as David Lynch, someone very interested in dreams, as the surrealists, I think the best manifestations of surrealism were visual. I think it did not work very well at all with poetry. It didn't work very well at all with prose. But it worked with cinema, and it worked with painting. And of course, because if you're trying to get at something beyond reason, then how do you do it? Well, you do it through the ear, you do it through the eye, which are alternate pathways to the brain that writing can't touch, that words can't touch. So anyway, and so I think, yes, I mean, obviously we're having these discussions, but the full merit of all of these things is only to be gotten when you actually watch them. Which is why I've never minded spoilers. Because often when I watch films, I'm not terribly interested in, at least explicitly in the narrative. I can very happily watch a film whose great secret was given. I knew that Rosebud was a sleigh. It was a sled far before I ever saw Citizen Kane, and of course that diminishes it in no respect whatsoever. The mark of great cinema. Any final words, gentlemen?
Did you get any coffees, D?
I didn't. Thanks, friends.
Bastards.
Yeah,
Bastards.
Bastards. I mean, everyone maxed out their credit card for, what do they call it? Cyber Monday. It's Cyber Monday. Fuck. Bugger off. Anyway, but that's okay. I mean, if you're listening to this this episode on repeat, then obviously Buy Me Coffee always open. And of course, you can do that by visiting buymeacoffee.com/John D. That's IOHNDEE. I would love to play the tune, but I did on the first episode, and I didn't get a strike, but I got a copyright notice. So unfortunately, I was lied to when I was told that song was public domain, because it isn't. People,
which one was it?
Old heads know. If you know, you know. Sandbatch.
No.
But anyway,
You play it often on the Twitter Spaces.
I do. Well, yeah.
different,
Ever since I got my
Yeah.
microphone. Yeah. The wonderful thing about Twitter is oh, that's Tigger. Sorry. Yeah, is that you can put anything on there, and there's no copyright. But anyway, Cyber Monday followed by Indigent Tuesday. Yeah, that's certainly the case. Well, I did my patriotic duty and did no shopping whatsoever today. So
Same.
bar humbug. One thing I should mention about the end of episode 8 that I forgot is that the song that they're listening to, that's playing through the radio prior to the woodsman taking control, is a song by a group called the Platters, and it's called My Prayer. And this song is prominent in another extraordinarily horrible scene, which is coming up later in the series, between Diane and the Good Dale. So yeah, another one of those songs that's sort of forever haunted by David Lynch's sinister associations, like the song Blue Velvet, or the song In Dreams by Roy Orbison. Never again will I be able to hear that song without thinking of Dean Stockwell singing into a lamp.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. As much as I like Roy Orbison, but, the power of art. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I greatly appreciate both of you going on this journey for me. I know, again, it's stretching out. We did a long episode tonight because we wanted to talk about episode 8. So I really thank you for your time and your wisdom and your company. So thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Prude.
Yeah.
Anytime.
So hopefully, maybe we'll follow up next week with another episode. But anyway, and of course, I should also say thank you to everyone who has been watching and listening, and everyone
riding along,
and everyone who, of course, will watch this in subsequent days. So thanks, friends, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Got a light.